Chapter 27:17. After boarding the plane, Chun Zhao fell into a deep sleep. Chun Zhao had been gone for 2 days, but the amount of sleep he lacked was far more than that. It wouldn't affect Chun Zhao's physical condition, but he would still get some sleep when necessary. No matter how fit or energetic a person was, they still needed to sleep. Just because you weren't tired didn't mean you didn't need to sleep. Apart from replenishing your energy, sleep could also adjust your body cells and physiological functions to their best state. Chun Zhao was no exception. It was one thing to be energetic, but after a long period of activity, the body's reaction mechanism would be out of balance. It was the same logic as how people needed holidays after work. Chun Zhao's body needed holidays too. Zhang Tianyi was enjoying the service of the flight attendants. The old man was dressed in a Chinese tunic suit. He looked quite cool. Fang Ye, Zhou Yi, Wei Ming, and Li Qin were gathered together. They were discussing in low voices. Anyway, they didn't like Chun Zhao in any way. They felt that Zhang Yi had found the wrong person. They thought that Chun Zhao was just an empty shell. Maybe he was strong, but he wasn't as strong as the 4 of them working together. When Chun Zhao boarded the plane, he immediately fell asleep in his seat. He didn't look like an expert at all. Zhang Tianyi only woke him up after he got off the plane. If the 4 young people thought so, they might as well let Chun Zhao sleep on the plane forever. Chun Zhao rubbed his sleepy eyes and asked, "Where are we going now? The hotel? Haven't you slept enough?" Zhang Tianyi glanced at him. "I haven't been sleeping enough recently," Chun Zhao said calmly. "Also, I'm hungry. Didn't you remove the spell on you?" "Yes, but eating and sleeping are normal physiological needs. You look like you haven't slept or eaten for a year." Zhang Tianyi's unintentional words hit the nail on the head. Chun Zhao hadn't slept or eaten for almost a year. "Forget it. Wake me up when we get there." Chun Zhao yawned and fell asleep in his seat. Chun Zhao didn't know how long he slept for. When Zhang Tianyi woke him up again, the sky was already gray. Chun Zhao rubbed his eyes. The car was moving slowly and bumpily. "Where are we?" "In the mountains," Zhang Tianyi said. "This is deep in the nature reserve, so there are not many man-made facilities, and there's only a dirt road on the ground. This place could be considered a deep mountain forest. Due to the color of the sky, this place looked a little dim. Most of the light was blocked by the dense vegetation." At this moment, the car stopped. The driver was a local. After dropping them off, he said a few words and left. "What do we do now? Where should I go?" Chun Zhao asked. Zhang Tianyi looked around. Waiting for someone. Zhang Tianyi's face suddenly broke into a smile, and he called out in a clear voice, "Immortal Wu Su, Immortal Qing Ping, since you're here, why are you still hiding?" Perfected Wu Su and perfected Qing Ping were nearby. He didn't feel it at all. However, after waiting for a long time, the 2 of them did not appear. Chun Zhao looked at Zhang Tianyi. Zhang Tianyi was still smiling. "Looks like they're not nearby. What were you doing just now?" "I'm testing them. If they are nearby, and I take the initiative to invite them, it will show that I am very smart," Zhang Tianyi said matter-of-factly. "Don't you think it's embarrassing to guess wrong? It's fine. There are no outsiders here." Chun Zhao sneered. Just then, Chun Zhao felt 2 oars approaching. Zhang Tianyi felt it almost at the same time. "Huh, they're here." Soon, he saw perfected Qing Ping and perfected Wu Su arrive on an old, green, 3-wheeled motorcycle. Perfected Wu Su was an old bag of bones. He was dressed rather casually and looked rather fashionable. He wore a motorcycle helmet, a loose t-shirt, and a pair of knee-length shorts. However, his white goatee flew in the wind, indicating his age. Comparatively, perfected Qing Ping was much more normal. When he saw Chun Zhao, he wasn't surprised. Instead, he nodded slightly at Chun Zhao from a dozen meters away. Chun Zhao was a bit confused. When they first met, it was a situation where they would fight to the death. Especially later, when he crippled Zhang Ding. He and Mao Mountain should be absolutely irreconcilable, right? Even if perfected Qing Ping knew that Chun Zhao was coming, he shouldn't be so calm. He shouldn't be so calm, right? At the very least, he should show some anger or hatred. But what's with that calm greeting? Is there some conspiracy? Perfected Tianyi, you're right. Perfected Wu Su and perfected Qing Ping greeted Zhang Tianyi with a Taoist seal. They were probably the three most senior people in Taoism. Of course, they might also be the three most senior people in the Huaxia spiritual world. Their status was also extremely respected. But after the greeting, the three went back to calling each other like normal. Old Zhang, Old Li, and Old Chun were all familiar names. I thought you would bring some disciples, Zhang Tianyi said. Forget it. I'm not completely confident this time, so I won't bring any disciples, perfected Wu Su said. At the same time, he looked at the people behind Zhang Tianyi. Old Zhang, you're really brave. You actually brought 4 disciples. Anyway, I'm prepared, Zhang Tianyi said, smiling. If the situation turns bad, I'll run away. Let's go, perfected Qing Ping said. We still have a long way to go. At the same time, he glanced at Chen Zhao. Aren't you going to talk to him? No, perfected Qing Ping said. I'll find a chance to talk to him later. Zhang Tianyi turned around and said to Chen Zhao and the others, Chen Zhao, let's go. The mountain road wasn't easy to walk on, but that was only for normal people or cultivators. At least, the mountain road that caused some trouble for Fanya and the others didn't bring too much trouble to Chen Zhao, Zhang Tianyi, perfected Wu Su, and perfected Qing Ping. Right at this moment, an extremely strong odor assaulted their nostrils. The smell wasn't disgusting, but it made them feel uncomfortable. It was as if some highly toxic chemical had leaked out. Along with the smell, there were also some blurry shadows. They shuttled through the forest in front of them, making it difficult for the naked eye to catch their figures. Chen Zhao still looked listless. At the same time, he looked at Zhang Tianyi and the others. Leave it to us 3 old guys, Zhang Tianyi said. Zhang Tianyi clearly planned to leave the most difficult part to Chen Zhao. Of course, Chen Zhao had already mentally prepared himself before coming. Chapter 27:18. Fanya looked at the battle before her. Those 3 were the few remaining antique figures in Huaxia, or even the entire world. Those demons and ghosts that they had never heard of could not even last around in front of them. Fanya saw with her own eyes that a monster the size of a small mountain had its guts pierced by Zhang Tianyi's heavenly lightning summoning. That kind of monster that only existed in nightmares was like a little kitten in front of Zhang Tianyi. She looked at Chen Zhao beside her. He was still in a daze. He couldn't even walk into a tree. Fanya was completely speechless. Was this guy here to be a judge like her? Chen Zhao had been adjusting his mental state. He kept making his mental state reach its peak, perfect, and even surpass it. Ever since his inner world opened, Chen Zhao's mental power had reached a terrifying level. Mental power didn't just affect the environment and enemies. It also affected his own body. Taoist Wushu turned to look at Chen Zhao, surprise in his eyes. That kid gave me a different feeling again, Taoist Wushu said. What do you think? I didn't find the wrong person, right? If there are no accidents, he'll be the uncrowned king of the spiritual world in the next 100 years. Zhang Tianyi nodded slightly. He'd also foreseen this situation. Chen Zhao's rise was too fast and too powerful. When he'd found out about Chen Zhao, he'd already reached the top. Furthermore, with his enhancing type ability, his future was practically sealed. Perhaps someone could defeat him, but no one could kill him. For example, if the 3 of them really wanted to deal with Chen Zhao, it wasn't like they had no way. They could seal him for a few years or even a few decades. But what about after that? If Chen Zhao died in the seal after a few decades, everything would be fine. But if Chen Zhao didn't die in the seal, then everything would be fine. When they reached the end of their lives, the sects behind them would face a destructive blow. This meant that they weren't willing to become enemies with Chen Zhao. There were no benefits. Instead, there would be terrifying consequences. And the old antiques weren't willing to do anything. Even if they wanted to, they didn't have the ability. Moreover, no one would be willing to do something like harming others without benefiting themselves. Zhang Tianyi turned to look at Chen Zhao. Surprise flashed in his eyes. How did Chen Zhao's spiritual power become so powerful? It would only take 2 days. How did he manage to expand his mental strength by 100-fold in just 2 days? Chen Zhao's spiritual power was already very strong. At the very least, There was a difference of tens of times between them and ordinary cultivators. But with this foundation, Chun Zhao was 100 times stronger. No matter how he thought about it, it was inconceivable. Was it because of the inner world? Zhang Tianyi had never cultivated the inner heaven and earth, but he had read about the various miracles of the inner heaven and earth through the records in the Mountain Gate. Therefore, Zhang Tianyi's first thought was that Chun Zhao had succeeded in cultivating his inner world. Opening his inner world resulted in a sharp increase in his mental strength. Enlightened Wu Su and enlightened Qing Ping did not know much about it. He felt that Chun Zhao's spiritual power was unfathomable. When perfected Qingping heard perfected Wushu say that Chun Zhao would be the uncrowned king of the supernatural world in the next 100 years, his gaze became even more determined. In fact, immortal Qingping's thoughts were very simple. Because of Zhang Ding, the Maoshan intersect was in a state of decline. No matter what Zhang Ding did, he was still the face of Mao Mountain. But now, Mao Mountain's reputation had been destroyed. Moreover, Zhang Ding had caused a scene in the Maoshan intersect. In the end, he had even flattened the Yao Ceiling Tower. It was a huge blow to the Mao Mountain disciples. But what if the person who had humiliated the Maoshan intersect was actually a member of Mao Mountain? Moreover, he was someone who was destined to bring glory to Mao Mountain. It was just like how Zhang Tianyi had brought the Celestial Master sect to Dragon Tiger Mountain. Dragon Tiger Mountain and Mao Mountain were actually on the same level. In terms of heritage, background, and heritage, Mao Mountain was not inferior to Dragon Tiger Mountain. The only difference was that Dragon Tiger Mountain had Zhang Tianyi. But now, she felt that Mao Mountain had a hope of having another Zhang Tianyi. No, he had more advantages than Zhang Tianyi. He was younger, and he could even lead Mao Mountain until the next spiritual tide. Of course, the premise was that he could resolve his grudge with Mao Mountain. But to perfected Qingping, Chun Zhao's heritage was inextricably linked to Mao Mountain. Even Chun Zhao did not deny it. Moreover, she did not plan to pursue the matter with Zhang Ding. As long as Chun Zhao was willing to admit that he was from the Qingyi sect, she would be able to get him to admit that he was from the Maoshan sect. Then, she could ask Chun Zhao to inherit Mao Mountain's heritage, and it would be much easier. Perfected Qingping's cultivation was not comparable to Zhang Tianyi's. In fact, her current cultivation did not truly belong to her. But in terms of political wisdom, she was not inferior to Zhang Tianyi. In the past few decades, Zhang Ding had not only caused trouble for the Maoshan sect, but she had resolved all of them. Zhang Ding was the face of the Maoshan sect. But in terms of power and influence, Zhang Ding might not be able to compare to perfected Qingping. To perfected Qingping, as long as he could get Chun Zhao, any compromise would be acceptable, because this person's value was simply too great. Take the current Zhang Tianyi as a comparison. All the organizations and departments wanted Zhang Tianyi to have his name on them. What special chairman? What honorary member? What grand elder? As long as Zhang Tianyi nodded, they would be willing to sell their own organizations. Chun Zhao could vaguely sense perfected Qingping's intentions. Of course, Chun Zhao would not say anything. Chun Zhao did not have a good impression of the Maoshan sect. After all, not long ago, they had been at each other's throats. Moreover, Chun Zhao had destroyed one of their pillars. With such a huge grudge, it would be strange if they could really let go of it. So Chun Zhao had been avoiding contact with perfected Qingping. On one hand, he had gotten his revenge, and the spell on him had been removed. So he did not want to have any conflict with the Maoshan sect now. And he did not want to have any relationship with the Maoshan sect. So the best choice was to keep his current distance. Chun Zhao had been paying attention to the changes in his external and internal worlds. Chun Zhao felt that he still did not fully understand his internal worlds. The abilities of his internal worlds did not seem to be limited to what they were currently. They did not only make his spiritual power skyrocket. They did not just increase his spiritual power, but the feeling was too vague. Chun Zhao was like a blind man groping an elephant. At the same time, he was a lone pioneer. With no one to guide him, he could only find his way forward. Chapter 2719. Something's wrong. There seem to be more demons here, Zhang Tianyi said with a frown. Zhang Tianyi said with a frown. At the same time, he casually flicked his hand, sending out a straight line. More than 10 demonized demons were instantly vaporized. Spiritual Master Wushu and Spiritual Master Qingping felt it too. It wouldn't be strange if the leaking demonic qi had infected the demons here. But the problem was that there were too many demons here. They even exceeded the number of demons in the Qinling Mountains. Moreover, most of them had been baptized by modern society. How could they gather here in large numbers and wait for the 1,000-year-old demon to transform them into another person? More and more fiendish demons appeared in front of them. The three finally felt something was wrong. Why do I feel like we've fallen into the 1,000-year-old corpses trap like the ancestor from 1,000 years ago? That's impossible, Spiritual Master Qingping said with a frown. No one can break the seal. Maybe no one can break the seal, but it's not impossible to undo the seal in advance. At least we all know what to do, Zhang Tianyi said. And we don't need to do it too much in advance, just a few days in advance. Doesn't this mean that we're going to face that old monster? Moreover, it's an old monster in his prime, or even more terrifying than we imagined. This means that the situation we're facing is more dangerous than we imagined. Someone's helping that old monster escape. It's okay. If the situation changes, he'll take the blame and we'll retreat first, Zhang Tianyi muttered. Old Zhang, I heard you. Although Chen Zhao was more than 20 meters away, he could still hear old Zhang. Chen Zhao was more than 20 meters away, but he couldn't withstand the spiritual power he released. The slightest movement in the surroundings was basically imprinted in his mind like a light bulb. Compared to the small world in the past, his senses were sharper. Suddenly, Chen Zhao reached out and grabbed Fanya's shoulder. Fanya was stunned. What? The next moment, Fanya felt Chen Zhao pull her violently. She took a few steps back and fell on her butt. Then Chen Zhao walked in front and replied indifferently, to save your life. You. Fanya stood up, wanting to argue with him. Just then, Chen Zhao raised his voice again. Old Zhang, look after your disciple. I won't be so kind as to save her again next time. As an elder, you should act like one. I asked you to take care of my disciples and grand-disciples because I wanted you to set an example for them. At this time, 2 pitch-black demons appeared in front of Zhang Tianyi. Although there was no such thing as good or bad power in this world, the demons that were eroded by the demonic aura were basically no longer on good terms. It was as if his brain had been filled with gutter oil. Basically, he had to say goodbye to reason. Ouch! I've absorbed some devil qi in my body. I can't take it anymore. Enlightened Wusu, enlightened Qingping. You guys take over, Zhang Tianyi suddenly shouted. Taoist Wushu and Taoist Qingping rolled their eyes at Zhang Tianyi. With Zhang Tianyi's cultivation, even if he were to inhale it as oxygen, it would only be an aerobic exercise for him, let alone a little bit of demonic qi. The only ones who could be infected by the devil qi were Fanya and the other 3 children. Anyway, the few of them could basically absorb the devil qi as a trace element. After all, the demonic qi contained some spiritual components that were useful to their cultivation. At their level, they couldn't truly be invulnerable. But just relying on the devil qi was basically like sending food to them. It was just like how he devoured the 2 old demons, the giant dragon and Kunlai. The devil qi on the 2 old demons would basically turn ordinary people or cultivators black if they touched it. In the end, it was a feast for Chen Zhao. To be able to send so many demons here, including some foreign ones, it means that the person who let the 1,000-year-old corpse out of prison in advance has a strong identity and power. This is going to be troublesome. Enlightened Wusu was also afraid of trouble, especially this time, which wasn't just any ordinary trouble. 1,000 years ago, the 1,000-year-old corpse had caused 2 deaths and 1 injury to the leaders of the 3 mountains. Moreover, it had rampaged through the spiritual world in the Central Plains, and no one could stop it for decades. 1,000 years later, it would probably be even more difficult to deal with than 1,000 years ago. Of course, 1,000 years later wasn't the same as 1,000 years ago. After all, it was the end of the Tang dynasty 1,000 years ago. It was chaotic and the court was powerless. But now, It was peaceful, and the 1,000-year-old corpse had appeared. If it did whatever it wanted, it would indeed bring about a lot of turmoil. But what about after the turmoil? No matter how strong the 1,000-year-old corpse was, it was still alone. Could it recruit soldiers and plot to usurp the throne? What a joke. It wasn't just ordinary people who were patriotic. Nowadays, demons were patriotic too. Who wants to play with you and usurp the throne? Therefore, the 1,000-year-old corpse couldn't be as unbridled as it was 1,000 years ago. What they had to do now was to make the turmoil smaller or extinguish it before it happened. Just then, Chun Zhao pinched his nose. The 3 old Taoist priests in front covered their mouths. They couldn't help it. There was an extremely strong corpse aura in front of them. What's that smell? Does it smell nice? Fanya sniffed and asked in confusion. That's the smell of the corpse fragrance pill mixed with corpse aura. Chun Zhao glanced at Fanya. Do you think it smells good? If you smell too much, livor mortis will appear on your body. Usually, zombies that awaken in the wild use corpse fragrance to trap living creatures. Oh, it can also cause arthritis. Chun Zhao explained enthusiastically. Fanya and the other 3 immediately covered their noses. It's not as bad as he says. You're all talented people. Don't be scared by his words. Zhang Tianyi reminded them from the front. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief and glared at Chun Zhao. At most, there's a small chance that you'll die from the corpse poison. It's not that troublesome, Zhang Tianyi added. Zhang Tianyi looked around. I want to see if there's anything special about a 1,000-year-old demon's corpse. Roar. Suddenly, a white figure pounced out of the darkness. Sizzle. Before the white figure could get close to Zhang Tianyi, it was struck in the head by a purple electric arc and fell to the ground. It was a bald humanoid creature with short white hair all over its body. Black blood spurted out of the exploded head and emitted a strong stench. Just then, more white-haired creatures appeared in the darkness. Are they white-haired zombies? Spiritual Master Qingping asked. They're much faster than white-haired zombies. Zhang Tianyi shook his head. They're almost as fast as bronze zombies. They're just not as strong, but the corpse poison they carry is even stronger than bronze zombies. Chapter 2720. Zombies were divided into different levels too. The weakest were the living corpses, followed by iron corpses, bronze corpses, silver corpses, and gold corpses. Of course, there was another type of mutation after the living corpses, the white-furred zombies. As for the zombies with the title of metal, they were divided into different levels. There was a clear difference in strength. Moreover, it could also be refined continuously to reach a higher level of zombies. However, the disadvantage was that they weren't easy to refine and their numbers were limited. The biggest advantage of white-furred zombies was that they could be mass-produced. As long as one could master the mutation method, they could be mass-produced. Almost all the major sects had their own techniques too. Even normal cultivators who knew a bit about refining corpses could develop the white-furred zombie technique. Therefore, there were many types of white-furred zombies in the Huaxia supernatural world. They all had their own specialties. This was what Zhang Tianyi had said earlier. He wanted to see how different the white-furred zombies made by the 1,000-year-old corpse were. However, there were so many white-furred zombies here that it made one's hair stand on end. Even Zhang Tianyi, Spiritual Master Wushu, and Spiritual Master Qingping were extremely busy. With their strength, although the white-furred zombies were powerful, they couldn't pose a threat to them no matter how many there were. Although they couldn't pose a threat, they could cause trouble. Zhang Tianyi could kill dozens of white-furred zombies with one lightning bringer. However, he couldn't kill the white-furred zombies before him at all. The corpses used by the white-furred zombies aren't from the present. Zhang Tianyi said, they look like ancient soldiers. There are some marks on them. It's the zombie soldiers used to suppress the 1,000-year-old corpse, Spiritual Master Qingping said. Spiritual Master Qingping said, these corpse soldiers were collected by the imperial court over the past few decades. There were 200,000 corpse soldiers in total. They were then refined into corpse soldiers by the ancestors of Maoshan Mountain. Then they gathered the souls of the soldiers and worked with the heavenly spirit-killing array. Only then did they suppress the ancient corpse for 1,000 years. Taoist Master Qing Ping looked at these corpse soldiers with a complicated look in his eyes. But after the 1,000-year-old corpse was unsealed, these corpse soldiers that were used to suppress were also the first to suffer revenge. Now, they have become the 1,000-year-old corpse's puppets. 200,000? It's so bitter. Zhang Tianyi frowned. If they had enough time, any one of them could defeat the 200,000 zombie soldiers. However, the current situation didn't allow them to delay. Chun Zhao suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the three people fighting before him. I can sense that the corpse chi on these corpse soldiers that were killed seems to be guided by some kind of power. The three of them were stunned for a moment and exchanged glances. Just now, when they killed these corpse soldiers, the scene was a bit chaotic, so they didn't think too much about it. But after Chun Zhao's reminder, they realized that the corpse aura of the corpse soldiers they had killed seemed to be guided by some kind of power. Zhang Tianyi was shocked. Not good. This is the place where the coffins fall. 9 meridians burial of bones, heaven and earth burial of souls. Enlightened Master Wu Su and Enlightened Master Qing Ping's expressions changed. Chun Zhao, is there any way to completely destroy the corpse chi? No. Chun Zhao answered directly. At the same time, Chun Zhao gave Zhang Tianyi a questioning look. That 1,000-year-old corpse wants to give us a taste of our own medicine. Our ancestors sealed him for 1,000 years, and now he wants to seal us. The corpse soldiers we kill will emit corpse aura. This is also the place where the coffins fall, so the corpse aura will gather and not disperse. The 1,000-year-old corpse wants to use the corpse aura and the coffins to form a 9-vein soul burial formation. Chun Zhao thought about it. After all, he didn't want to be sealed. Moreover, this 9 veins soul burial formation wasn't something good just from its name. Chun Zhao raised his right palm and controlled the surrounding corpse aura to gather in his palm. Can you tell what method he's using? Perfected Wushu asked in a low voice. Perfected Qingping and Zhang Tianyi both shook their heads. This move was very strange. Chun Zhao didn't use any magic either. You guys continue killing. I'll control the corpse aura. Chun Zhao wasn't using any method at all. He was using the power of the small world. He was using the power of the small world to forcibly attract the corpse aura. Although the corpse aura was being guided and controlled, it was still nothing compared to the power of Chun Zhao's small world. Compared to the power of Chun Zhao's small world, this guiding power was nothing. It was like a tug of war between an adult and a baby. The two weren't on the same level at all. If the opponent wasn't outside the range of his small world, Chun Zhao would have pulled the opponent over along with himself. The corpse aura gathered in Chun Zhao's palm and formed a turbid, solid gray bead. Soon, the surrounding corpse aura was sucked dry. Chun Zhao clearly didn't plan on stopping just like that. Chun Zhao felt that the small world wasn't only effective on the outside. It could even affect the white-haired zombies. Chun Zhao realized that he could actually suck out the corpse aura from the zombies' bodies. Immediately, the white-haired zombies fell down and rose. It was a spectacular scene. Huh? Chun Zhao glanced at Zhang Tianyi and the others. Chun Zhao wanted to see if this would work on Zhang Tianyi and the others. However, the small world was immediately blocked by the aura of Zhang Tianyi and the others. Chun Zhao pursed his lips and looked at Fangya and the others. He planned on trying the same thing on them. The four of them suddenly felt a terrifying power pass through their bodies. The result was the same. Their spiritual power blocked Chun Zhao's small world. Chun Zhao's small world could tear them into pieces instantly. However, he couldn't suck out all their energy like the white-haired zombies. Zhang Tianyi and the others turned to look at Chun Zhao. They didn't expect Chun Zhao to have such a killer move. In an instant, he killed almost 200,000 white-haired zombies. Chun Zhao put away the bead condensed from corpse aura. The bead was less than 1 centimeter in diameter, but it weighed 1,000,000 tons. It was condensed from the purest corpse aura. 9 guys with heavy corpse aura are coming, Chun Zhao warned. Actually, they already felt it without Chun Zhao's reminder. Not long after, the 9 fellows exuding corpse aura appeared in front of them. Chun Zhao wanted to use the same trick again, but they were also protected by spiritual power. Chun Zhao was surprised. These 9 should be zombies, right? Zombies were corpses, which were dead things. They shouldn't have intelligence, let alone spiritual power, right? These 9 zombies were countless times stronger than the soldiers before in terms of aura and size. Moreover, they were all wearing armor, just like the generals of ancient times. Qing Ping narrowed his eyes and looked at the 9 zombies. 9 refinements, golden body. Although spiritual master Qing Ping wasn't from the Black Cloth sect, but Mao Mountain was the authority in this area. Qing Ping himself also knew a few strange corpse refining techniques. Therefore, he immediately realized that the 9 zombies were all using the forbidden technique, 9 refined golden body. Careful, these zombies are extremely strong. They can't be attacked by water or fire, and the 5 elements can't be destroyed. Their bodies are indestructible. You can only destroy them with spells outside of the 5 elements. Chapter 27-21. To Zhang Tianyi, perfected Wushu, and perfected Qingping, these 9 zombies were already very troublesome enemies. They weren't powerless, but they wouldn't be as relaxed as before. I'll take care of one first, perfected Qingping shouted. Cyclic coffin. A cyclic coffin suddenly appeared under one of the zombies' feet. The zombie was placed inside, and the coffin closed. Heavy knocking sounds could be heard coming from the bronze coffin, but they couldn't break it open. The cyclic coffin slowly sank into the ground. Perfected, Qingping pressed his palm into the air. The cyclic coffin didn't make any more sounds. Enlightened Master Wu Su tossed out a square seal. He'd thought that the seal was used to smash people. But after it left perfected Wu Xiu's hand, dozens of beams of white light shot out. The white light instantly pierced through the 2 zombies in front of him, leaving thousands of holes. Zhang Tianyi wasn't any weaker than them. Chains shot out from the darkness one after another, binding the 3 zombies. Then, he directed lightning to hit the zombies along the chains. The 3 zombies were electrocuted into charcoal. In 10 minutes, 9 extremely powerful zombies had been destroyed. Of course, not all of them had been destroyed. 3 of them had been suppressed by perfected Qingping. She clearly had an idea about the 3 zombies. She planned to take them home for research. At the moment, on a mountain shrouded in darkness, a few figures appeared. 9-tailed fox. Are those the leaders of Kunlun Mountain, Mountain, and Dragon Tiger Mountain? Yes. Tamamonome nodded. She was just curious why Mao Mountain had sent perfected Qingping instead of Zhongding. It was a little different from her plan, but it wouldn't affect her plan too much. But Tamamonome realized that there was someone else among the group. Chun Zhao. Why was he here? Tamamonome didn't react at all. She didn't show any emotion. According to our agreement, lend me your sword. Mr. Kaniya, with your cultivation, there is no need for you to borrow my sword, Tamamonome said with a light smile. The cultivation of those 3 people is not weak, especially the Taoist priest from Kunlun Mountain and Longwu Mountain. Compared to their grandmaster 1,000 years ago, they are much stronger. Even from 10 miles away, I can feel the threat that they bring to me. Moreover, they should have already felt that the plan and trap that I made earlier will probably fail. In the end, we still have to use our true strength to decide the outcome. Those 3 people are not weak, especially the Taoist priest from Kunlun Mountain and Longwu Mountain. Tamamonome smiled as she took out her Kusanagi sword, but she didn't directly hand it over to the Kenyaka-san. Mr. Junfeng, I can lend you the sword, but aren't you going to follow our agreement and lend me the item? I never go back on my word, Tamamonome said calmly. But before that, you need to help me kill those 3 human cultivators. I'm afraid I can't, Tamamonome said calmly. My cultivation is shallow, and I'm a fox demon, so I'm afraid of thunder spells. Those 3 cultivators all have extremely powerful thunder spells. If I rashly get involved in the battle, I'm afraid that dying will be the least of my worries. If I'm not careful, I'll be destroyed in both body and soul. Mr. Junfeng snorted coldly. He was very dissatisfied with Tamamonome's decision to stay out of it. Tamamonome's so-called fear of thunder spells was just an excuse. Ordinary fox demons were afraid of thunder spells because they didn't have a human body, but they still had a human nature. They were a different kind of demon, so they were rejected by the heaven and earth lock. Every 500 years of cultivation, a fox demon would experience a lightning tribulation. Therefore, the fear of thunder spells was imprinted in the blood of fox demons. Tamamonome was different. She was a fox of the Green Mountains. She was born with 9 tails, so she was a different kind of fox demon. She could even control thunder spells. How could she be afraid of thunder spells? Therefore, Tamamonome's words were just excuses. Mr. Junfeng didn't believe Tamamonome's words. Of course, Tamamonome didn't expect her excuses to fool Mr. Junfeng. She was just making up an excuse to show that she didn't want to participate in the battle. If Mr. Junfeng could show his ability to suppress everyone, she wouldn't mind. She didn't mind adding icing on the cake so that Mr. Junfeng could win more easily. However, Zhang Tianyi perfected Wushu, and perfected Qingping were the strongest team in China's supernatural world. Moreover, it could be seen from Mr. Junfeng's fear of the three. Even he didn't have the confidence to win. He had also neglected Chen Zhao, the person that even Tamamonome was afraid of. When she broke out of the seal, she had already lost to Chen Zhao once. She hadn't been in a good state at that time, but a loss was a loss. Now, Tamamonome's cultivation had completely recovered. However, she could feel that Chen Zhao's cultivation had improved since they last met in Istanbul. It even gave her a very bad feeling. Actually, Tamamonome had obtained some things from the Kusanagi sword recently. Not only had her spiritual power completely recovered, but her cultivation had also improved. She had originally thought that she wouldn't lose so easily against Chen Zhao. However, when she met Chen Zhao again, that kind of self-confidence had already disappeared. She only felt an inexplicable fear. The feeling that Chen Zhao gave her was that he was more dangerous than ever before. It was obvious that while she was growing, Chen Zhao was also growing. Moreover, he was growing faster than her. Therefore, she was only willing to follow the original agreement and lend the Kusanagi sword to Mr. Junfeng. At the moment, the Kusanagi sword was only a sharp sword to her. After learning the secret of the Kusanagi sword, she didn't need it as a weapon anymore. Therefore, even if Mr. Junfeng wasn't willing to return the Kusanagi sword, she didn't care. Moreover, she didn't believe that Mr. Junfeng would fall out with her for a sword that was only sharp. Suddenly, Mr. Junfeng looked at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao, who was several kilometers away, also felt someone's gaze. Separated by the vast darkness of the night, their eyes met. Who is that? Mr. Junfeng realized that he had forgotten someone. The person wasn't old, but he made Mr. Junfeng feel a little uncomfortable. Tamamonome frowned and shook her head. I don't know him. His cultivation is extraordinary. His eyes are sharp, and his senses are extremely acute. He hides his aura. Even I can't sense his strength. He can't be an ordinary person. There are many masters in the world, Tamome said indifferently. Especially among the humans, there are countless hidden masters. It's not strange to see a few of them occasionally. Mr. Junfeng shook his head and said, How can a hidden master like him be hidden? If you think it's inappropriate, why don't you leave now and think about it in the future? Junfeng shook his head. You've said it before. Now that the world is at peace, and it's a golden age, the imperial court has the extraordinary power to suppress everything. If I can't cripple the leaders of Kunlun, Longhu, and Maoshan sects, I'll have to face eternal pursuit in the future. Chapter 27-22. Mr. Jun's idea was simple. For one, he didn't know much about the current era. What he knew so far came from Tamamo no Mei and her subordinates. What Tamamo no Mei told him should be true. After all, he would find out as soon as he left the forest. Therefore, it was meaningless to hide it from him. Therefore, he had a rough understanding of the power of the mortal world. If he came out, the imperial court wouldn't be able to tolerate him. Therefore, Mr. Jun hoped to cripple Kunlun Mountain, Mao Mountain, and Longhu Mountain, which were most likely to pose a threat to him. As long as he dealt with the strongest cultivators of the three mountains, they would be the top 3 cultivators of China. Then, even if the imperial court hunted him down in the future, he would at least have an easier time. Tamamo no Mei's help was a plan that had been made 1,000 years ago. At that time, Mr. June felt that he wasn't strong enough to do whatever he wanted. Being sealed by the cultivators of Mao Mountain and the Central Plains was only part of his plan. Before he was sealed, he made a trip to Japan. He found a sealed Tamamo no Mei. At that time, Tamamo no Mei was the only person he could think of who could cooperate with him and had the qualifications to do so. He helped Tamamo no Mei remove the seal in advance, and Tamamo no Mei needed to do the same for him after he removed the seal. Just like that, the two peerless monsters reached an agreement. Even though it had been 1,000 years, it seemed that the two monsters kept their promises, putting aside their respective plans and schemes. In terms of helping the other party remove the seal in advance, they had done it. Mr. June did this because he was worried that the cultivators would set up a trap in advance. If there was a formation, he could set up a targeted trap in advance. He might be able to seal Mr. June again. He had to remove the seal in advance and make preparations in advance. Only then would he be able to take the initiative. However, there seemed to be some problems with his preparations. First of all, the 3 great cultivators of the 3 mountains were all more powerful than he had imagined. Moreover, the inheritance of 1,000 years seemed to have reached them, making them even more powerful. They were even more powerful than the cultivators of the 3 mountains 1,000 years ago. In particular, Zhang Tianyi, an enlightened master wushu, gave him a feeling that the cultivators of the 3 mountains 1,000 years ago weren't a threat. As for the young man outside of his plan, he gave him a very bad feeling. It wasn't just a threat. It was also dangerous. Jun Fong furrowed his eyebrows. That man likely cultivates an essence soul Dharma spell. It's very powerful. Mr. Jun Fong sensed a faint mental power enveloping his surroundings. Because the mental energy was too far away, it was hard to detect. Moreover, due to the protection of his body, his mental power could not penetrate his body to investigate. However, he was still able to release his mental power from such a distance. That was enough to make him fearful. Essence Soul Dharma spells? Tamamo no Mei's eyes flashed. Essence Soul Dharma spells were actually mental spells. She denied knowing Chun Zhao, but she could not forget Chun Zhao's cultivation system. Chun Zhao was clearly an enhancer. Why did Jun Fong-san say that it was a spirit type? Her senses weren't as sharp as Jun Bang-san's. However, she knew that Mr. June must have made a mistake. After all, she had fought Chun Zhao before. Therefore, she wouldn't mistake Chun Zhao's cultivation system. But now, Jun Bang-san was mistaken. So, she had to reconsider their partnership. After all, even his enemy's power system was wrong. Their chances of winning would also become very slim. 1,000 years ago, you received an Essence Soul attack too, right? So, you should be immune to Essence Soul attacks now, right? Jun Fong shook his head and said, that depends on the level of the primordial spirit attack. This person's primordial spirit is so strong that I've never seen it before. If he uses some primordial spirit spell that I've never seen before, even I wouldn't dare to say that I could defeat him easily. Actually, ever since he'd mastered the demon body, he had a passive skill. As long as it didn't kill him, it would make him stronger. At least for most spells, as long as it wasn't an instant death spell. Every time, he would increase his magic resistance by different amounts. In the past few decades, he caused havoc in the Central Plains. It was to attract cultivators to attack him. Then, his resistance would also increase. However, there was a limit to this resistance. It wasn't absolute immunity. 1,000 years ago, there weren't any outstanding cultivators with Essence Soul spells. There were even fewer who specialized in Essence Soul cultivation. Mr. Jun Fong looked into the distance in the darkness. He might be a good choice. He can help me make up for what I lack in Essence Soul. This person's aura is thick and fierce, Tamamo reminded. He looks more like a strong man. It should be because his Essence Soul is thick and solid, Mr. Jun Fong said. A strong man can't reach such a level. Even a demon can't, let alone a human. Tamamo gave up on correcting Mr. Junfong. Since Mr. Junfong's personality was like this, she obviously wouldn't meddle. After all, he was stubborn and believed that what he thought was right. He wouldn't listen to other people's suggestions or opinions. Only after suffering would he understand what was wrong. However, the enemy he was facing was Chun Zhao. Would Chun Zhao allow him to correct his mistakes? Tamamo no, Mei wasn't optimistic at all. After all, even if Chun Zhao was willing to correct his mistakes, Zhang Tianyi and the others probably wouldn't be happy either. Thus, Tamamo was even more determined in her strategy. She would just be a spectator and not interfere with the battle at all. Her main force was making a fool of herself. Was she going to die? At the same time, Zhang Tianyi, Spiritual Master Wushu, and Spiritual Master Qingping suddenly stopped. Do you feel it? There's a huge evil in that direction. 2 auras. No, 2 of them are the strongest. There are 3 weaker ones. Among the 2 enormous presences, one must be the 1,000-year ancient corpse. But who is the other one? It's unfamiliar. Tamamo no Mei, the 9-tailed fox. She went to Japan to cause trouble in the past and was sealed. She only escaped last year. I fought her once. Not only did Chun Zhao feel it, but he could also see Tamamo no Mei through his spiritual power. He could also see the 3 unfamiliar demons behind Tamamo no Mei. They were all very strong. In terms of power, they were already at the peak of the Shangqing realm. Chun Zhao also noticed the owner of the other aura. It was very strange. It was like a human, but not a human, like a demon, but not a demon. Zhang Tianyi naturally knew that Chun Zhao and Tamamo had fought before. That was also the first time he'd schemed against Chun Zhao and roasted him over fire. How strong is Tamamo no Mei? She'd just been unsealed, so I can't tell how strong she is. I won by a bit, but it's been so long. She's probably recovered to her peak. She's probably stronger than that 1,000-year-old corpse. Chapter 27-23. Grandmaster, leave that Tamamo no Mei to us. We can stall her, Fangya said firmly. Her eyes shone with confidence. The other 3 had the same look and determination. Zhang Tianyi, Taoist Wushu, and Taoist Qingping glanced at each other. Taoist Qingping suddenly laughed. Celestial teacher Zhang, you're indeed extraordinary. Even a junior like you has such vigor and courage. Looks like we're lagging behind. We didn't have such courage when we were young, Taoist Wushu said, chuckling. Of course, Zhang Tianyi could tell that Taoist Wushu and Taoist Qingping's words were full of mockery. Where did you get the confidence to think you can stop Tamamo no Mei? Zhang Tianyi felt that his 4 disciples were a bit arrogant, but he still admired their courage. He was rather peaceful and didn't want to destroy their enthusiasm and courage. Fangya and the others exchanged glances. Fangya walked up and said, since he can deal with Tamamo no Mei alone, we should be fine if we work together. Chun Zhao rubbed his nose and chuckled at Zhang Tianyi. Zhang Tianyi almost lost his balance. His head spun. Fuck, he shouldn't have let them spar with Chun Zhao. No, he didn't even let them meet. Chun Zhao was poisonous. It had only been half a day, and his disciples had been poisoned. Their brains weren't enough to explain the severity of the problem. It was like mercury poisoning in the brain. They'd actually exchanged one move with Chun Zhao. Then, Fangya succeeded in one move and defeated Chun Zhao. This was the reason why they could deal with Tamamo no Mei. Yes, it was reasonable and convincing. Taoist Wushu and Taoist Qingping also turned their heads to avoid Zhang Tianyi's awkward expression. Right now, Zhang Tianyi was thinking about finding a corner with no one and burying these 4 idiotic youths. That would be an insult to the sect. This wasn't the place to use your confidence. Zhang Tianyi felt stifled. Just then, 2 auras rushed toward him. The darkness and vegetation before him were instantly pierced, forming a path of fire. A man and a woman walked through the path of fire. Behind the man and woman, there were 4 figures that clearly had the appearance or body shape of monsters. It was not difficult to identify the origins of the 4 demons. A man in a kimono had his right hand resting on the hilt of a katana hanging from his waist. Demon blade. Chun Zhao was no stranger to him. After all, he had once robbed one of Tamamo no Mei's old subordinates, the white-face Oni. The devil blade incarnation in front of him had a murderous aura and a sharp chill that were not inferior to white-face Gui Che. It seemed like there were quite a number of powerful demon swords in Japan. Chun Zhao had thought that the white-faced demon was one of the best Japanese swordsmen. He did not expect that there would be another equally strong devil blade. On the left of the devil blade incarnation was a white-clothed woman wearing a witch's attire. The woman's eyes were very beautiful. Her hair was long and straight, and there was a faint smile on her face. The aura on his body was not chaotic like that of a demon. Instead, it had a hint of friendliness. He was also from Japan. However, the aura of that woman was the opposite of the woman in black standing on her left. The woman in black had strange patterns on her face. Her body was hidden under a black robe, and something unsettling seemed to be brewing inside. What a strange woman. Chun Zhao looked at her a few more times. As for the last one, Chun Zhao was somewhat familiar with his state. It should be the amalgamation of countless souls controlled by a powerful consciousness. On the other hand, the leaders, Tamamo no Mei and Mr. Jun Fong, looked ordinary. At least, Fangya and the other three young people could not sense Tamamo no Mei and Mr. Jun Fong's auras. Therefore, their senses were not as direct as the four great demons behind them. The two sides did not attack immediately. After all, they were all people with status and reputation. Therefore, it was necessary to use their eyes to express their respect for each other. Of course, this would only last for a moment. Then, it was time to analyze the situation. 4 teams against 2, Chun Zhao said, chuckling. Looks like we have a higher chance of winning. Fangya and the others could not help but roll their eyes. None of the opponents were easy to deal with. Was victory calculated like this? Moreover, the opponents also seemed to have 6 people, while they should have 8. No matter what, the 4 of them should be included, right? Victory is not calculated like this. Mr. Jun Fong smiled faintly. At the same time, he turned to Tamamo no Mei. How many can you take down? Tamamo no Mei was speechless. She really did not want to get involved. I could take down any one of the 3 Taoists. I won't lose before you decide the winner. She was not hiding her strength. Instead, she had come to this conclusion after seriously comparing their strengths. Mr. Jun Fong was not surprised by Tamamo no Mei's answer. Instead, it was reasonable. Then can your 4 subordinates contribute? They can hold one of them for 15 minutes. Tamamo no Mei looked at Chun Zhao. Except for that one. Mr. Jun Fong calculated silently. Tamamo no Mei would hold one of them, and her 4 subordinates would hold another for 15 minutes. He had to deal with the remaining 2 and make at least one of them lose the ability to fight in 15 minutes. Otherwise, the 4 cannon fodder would have been dealt with in a quarter of an hour, and the pressure on him would have been even greater. Tamamo no Mei, you're also a monster from the Central Plains. Although you're not active in China, don't forget where your roots are. Spiritual Master Wu Su was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he planned to instigate a rebellion before the battle. If he succeeded, everyone would be happy. If he failed, he would not lose anything. Spiritual Master Wu Su, I have my own goal, so I won't bother you. Since you recognize me, why don't we fight? Success and failure are determined by victory and defeat. This is the ancient common sense. Spiritual Master Wu Su shook his head. That's your strategy. It's not in our interest. So you want to get cold feet? Tamamo no Mei chuckled at Spiritual Master Wu Su. Spiritual Master Wu Su was not stupid. Such simple provocation was useless against old things like him. Even the young and energetic Chun Zhao would not fall for it. Spiritual Master Wu Su, this battle is unavoidable. Whether you want to fight or not, it's not up to you. We have to fight, but it's not just a simple fight. Spiritual Master Wu Su did not want to be held back by Tamamo no Mei. Suddenly, Zhang Tianyi yelled, "Done! Done? What was done?" Chun Zhao was confused. What had happened? Weren't they still discussing the competition? Why did you suddenly say done? Chapter 27-24. Unexpected opponents appeared on both sides. Mr. Jun's side was obviously Tam Amo. On Zhang Tianyi's side was Chun Zhao. The seemingly friendly meeting between the two sides broke in an instant. The first to attack was Sword Genius. Sword Genius flashed like a ghost and appeared before Fanya. At that moment, Fanya felt that the cold blade was only 0.1 centimeters away from her head. Just at this critical moment, 2 fingers pinched the edge of the demon's blade. Sword Genius was also dazed for a moment. He looked at Chun Zhao in shock. At that moment, he wasn't thinking about how to counterattack, but how to retreat. At the same time, Tam Amo's other general, 1,000 Spirits, the amalgamation of countless souls. He attacked. His first choice was to help Sword Genius. 1,000 Spirits opened his mouth and spat out countless evil spirits. The evil spirits charged at Chun Zhao like a wave of dirty water. Chun Zhao punched Devil Blade with the back of his hand. Clang! With the sound of metal clashing, Sword Genius was sent flying. As countless broken blades flew around, the Devil's Blade suffered a fatal injury. His demonic aura spread out uncontrollably. Chun Zhao turned around and looked at 1,000 Spirits. A wave of lava and dark serum rose under his feet and charged at the evil spirit wave. The evil spirit wave was instantly destroyed by the dark lava. The dark magma continued to rush towards 1,000 Spirits with unstoppable force. 1,000 Spirits wanted to reorganize his defense. But Tam Amo reached out and pulled him back. "Idiot, don't fight him head-on." Chun Zhao snorted and lifted his finger. A red and black blade split out of the dark lava and shot towards Tam Amo no Mei. Tam Amo quickly dodged, but she was still one step too late. Her right arm, along with 1,000 souls that she was pulling, were chopped off. In an instant, the dark lava swallowed 1,000 Spirits. 1,000 Spirits didn't even have time to struggle. He disappeared into the dark lava without a sound. Tam Amo snorted and flew higher into the sky. She looked down angrily at Chun Zhao. "Cleanse your sins and summon you to rebirth." The witch held the soul-summoning spell and waved it lightly. The spell released purple mana. It formed a gigantic purple sphere that enveloped her and another bewitching woman whose entire body was covered in purple patterns. The purple sphere blocked the dark magma, but didn't last long. This was because cracks had already appeared on the purple sphere when it came into contact with the dark lava. Tam Amo no Mei, who was in the sky, shouted. Her body transformed into her original form, and a 100-meter-long 9-tailed fox appeared in front of everyone. The 9-tailed fox slammed its claws on the ground. A huge gap appeared between Chun Zhao and the witch. The dark magma poured into the chasm, slowing down the impact of the dark magma on Miko-sama. At this time, Fanya and the others were already dumbfounded. In just a few short seconds, Chun Xiaobei's eyes widened. In just a few seconds. For them, it might be the charging time of an intermediate spell. But Chun Zhao, Tam Amo no Mei, and the 4 monsters had already fought a few rounds. Even a great demon from the enemy side was heavily injured and 1,000 souls had been devoured. Chun Zhao did not attack again. Instead, he stared at Tam Amo no Mei. The Tam Amo no Mei in front of him was much smaller than the first time he saw her. But the demonic aura on her body was more than 10 times stronger than before. The 9 tails behind her swayed. Every time they swung, the surrounding spiritual qi would be stirred up. Perfected Qingping, perfected Wushu, and Zhang Tianyi also tensed up. As long as Mr. Junfang attacked, they would immediately attack too. At this point, there was no need for any schemes or traps. Only when the winner was decided could the result be known. It didn't matter who was righteous or evil. The winner naturally represented justice. Mr. Junfang snickered. He didn't plan on continuing the confrontation. To him, stalling for time wouldn't do him any good. So, Mr. Junfang attacked first. Suddenly, a twisted, bloody arm stretched out from Mr. Junfang's left shoulder. The arm was even larger than Mr. Junfang's body. At the same time, it emitted a frightening demonic aura. Demonic body. Zhang Tianyi's expression froze. The three cultivators attacked at the same time. Perfected Wushu quickly performed a hand seal. All the spiritual chi in the area was guided by his magic power. Divine Wood Realm Sea. The surrounding sea of trees seemed to have come to life. The roots grew rapidly like wriggling dragons that swept towards Mr. Junfang. The demonic arm behind Mr. Junfang slammed the ground with all its might, creating a circle of black flames. The black flames instantly burned the surrounding roots into ashes. But this Divine Wood Realm Sea wasn't an ordinary technique. If it could be easily destroyed, Perfected Wushu would have retired long ago. Although the black flames burned a large number of roots, more of them swept towards Mr. Junfang. Finally, the first root wrapped around Mr. Junfang's demonic arm. Mr. Junfang's demonic arm tore down with all its might. The root was instantly torn apart. Even more tendrils wrapped themselves around Jun Bangsan's entire body. Swords, Zhang Tianyi shouted. Hundreds of divine weapons appeared in the sky. Go! Zhang Tianyi pointed at Mr. Junfang. Hundreds of divine weapons pierced into the roots in an instant. In the next instant, the roots exploded. Mr. Junfang flew out of the explosion unscathed. However, he had an additional demonic arm. One of the arms held a strange-looking longsword. Chun Zhao recognized the sword in Mr. Junfang's hand. It was the national treasure of Japan, the Kusanagi sword. Back then, he'd stolen the Yasukani no Magatama, and Tamamonome had stolen the Kusanagi sword. However, the Kusanagi sword was a bit strange. Chun Zhao didn't know if it was an illusion, but it seemed like the Kusanagi sword was missing something. Chun Zhao looked at Tamamonome. Are you sure you want to work with this failure that looks like it came from an underfunded biochemistry lab? It doesn't have a future. Tamamonome glanced at Mr. Junfang and said, I've never seen Mr. Junfang's real body. It does look cheap now, but Mr. Junfang's power is real. Even you might not be able to win. Chun Zhao had seen many lab products. At least half of them were much more beautiful than the thing in front of him. Mr. Junfang felt a little stifled. He'd been sealed for 2,000 years, but his intelligence was still there. So, he roughly understood the main idea of Chun Zhao and Tamamonome's conversation. They were just complaining about his poor appearance. Mr. Junfang? Zhang Tianyi narrowed his eyes and looked at Mr. Junfang. I didn't expect it to be the famous, immortal Su Fu. Fellow Taoist, you also know my common name? Chapter 27-25. In the past 5,000 years, it's basically impossible to find someone like Immortal Su who tricked an emperor into this realm. Therefore, Immortal Su is the #1 Taoist scammer. Mr. Junfang chuckled as well. Sigh. Fellow Taoist, you're too kind. I'm an immortal, not a Taoist, so I don't deserve to be called the #1 Taoist scammer. Su Fu, also known as Junfang, was the #1 scammer. He dared to trick and successfully trick the first emperor. Only this Su Fu, great immortal Su. Seeing that we're fated, why don't we make friends today? Let's each take a step back and say goodbye. Zhang Tianyi chuckled. We can make friends, but can you return the treasures you took from our 3 mountains 1,000 years ago? The 3 treasures have already merged with me. Seems like I can't make friends today. Mr. Junfang's smile gradually faded. It's fine. The person we hired is best at dismantling all kinds of things from buildings to human organs. There's nothing he can't dismantle. Mr. Junfang looked at Chun Zhao. He could feel the dangerous feeling Chun Zhao gave him. This feeling was completely different from Zhang Tianyi, Perfected Wushu, and Perfected Qingping. Zhang Tianyi, Perfected Wushu, and Perfected Qingping were the best in the world. However, he knew most of their cultivation, magic power, and even the spells they cultivated. It could even be said that he was familiar with them. Thus, he wasn't afraid of the 3. Even if they teamed up, Mr. Junfang was confident he could defeat them. Only Chun Zhao made him feel threatened. Even now, he still hadn't figured out what power system Chun Zhao had. Chun Zhao glanced at Zhang Tianyi, then Perfected Wushu and Perfected Qingping. I don't know why, but I suddenly feel like you guys are a hindrance here. Zhang Tianyi, perfected wushu, perfected Qingping. It was an arrogant statement in the spiritual world of China and even the world. Basically, no person or group dared to say such things, especially when the three of them were present at the same time. Zhang Tianyi chuckled. Chun Zhao, are you confident? I don't know. That Su guy hasn't used his full strength yet. Then shall we stall Tamamo no Mei for you? No need. Chun Zhao shook his head. She's not in the way. Tamamo no Mei's smile was filled with displeasure. Yep, she was very displeased. Chun Zhao, don't be too arrogant, Tamamo no Mei said faintly. Her real body was in a pouncing posture. Her 9 tails were no longer swinging, but raised up high. Tamamo no Mei grinned, her eyes emitting an ominous glint. Looks like I can't hold back anymore, Mr. Jun Fong said calmly. Mr. Jun Fong's body grew larger, and 2 more pairs of arms appeared on his back. His body also started to turn golden. In terms of quality, it was many times stronger than before. If the previous Jun Bangsan looked like a failed product from an underfunded biology lab, then Jun Bangsan was now a completely different person. In that case, the current Jun Bangsan was a pay-to-win boss. At the very least, his body was plated with a layer of gold. Chun Zhao's eyes suddenly turned red. Then a beam of red light shot out. Death ray? The principle is the same as the death ray. In fact, it was just a layer of fire element covering the eyes. Then, through the stimulation of magic power, the fire element burst out. Chun Zhao had always known the principle of the death ray. However, he hadn't mastered the power of the fire system in the past. So, even if he knew the principle, he couldn't use it. But after Chun Zhao opened his inner world, his inner world had completely turned into the fire element. The fire chi and nirvana flame had completely fused together. So, all the requirements of the death ray were fulfilled. Not just the death ray. Chun Zhao had also mastered many fire spells in the past. Of course, most fire spells were meaningless to Chun Zhao. When the death ray shot toward Mr. Jun Fong, he raised a golden arm to block it. Mr. Jun Fong's golden arm was almost burned red by Chun Zhao's death ray, but it didn't do much damage to him. At least, Chun Zhao felt like his death ray was just tickling him. Mr. Jun Fong wasn't just blocking Chun Zhao's death ray. His other arm was preparing a violent fire spell. His right hand blocked and absorbed Chun Zhao's death ray. Then, his left hand used the absorbed fire energy to release a fire spell. The next moment, a red beam of light whizzed out of Mr. Jun Fong's palm. A terrifying heat wave landed on Chun Zhao's body. But the same thing happened. Chun Zhao absorbed the heat wave directly. Both Chun Zhao and Mr. Jun Fong expended very little energy in this exchange. It was almost the same amount of energy that Chun Zhao released. After Mr. Jun Fong absorbed and processed it, it was sent back to Chun Zhao. There was almost no energy consumption in the process. This meant that both Chun Zhao and Mr. Jun Fong had a very high utilization rate of energy. Fire element? Mr. Jun Fong stared at Chun Zhao with sparkling eyes. Since he knew Chun Zhao's element, it was easy. Mr. Jun Fong had a very high resistance to fire. He was almost immune to it. Not only was his resistance high, but he could also absorb fire energy attacks. So, he felt that he was invincible in this battle. The pair of golden arms at the top of Mr. Jun Fong's back rose high. The sky rumbled. A terrifying electric snake landed on Mr. Jun Fong's right palm. Then, he aimed his left palm at Chun Zhao. Boom! The electric current was almost endless. Mr. Jun Fong had only used a spell to guide the lightning. He didn't create the current himself. So, as long as the electric current in the clouds wasn't used up, the terrifying attack wouldn't stop. Zhang Tianyi's expression changed when he saw Mr. Jun Fong's lightning attracting spell. This was Dragon Tiger Mountain's unique lightning technique. But Mr. Jun Fong's was even more perfect. As a celestial master of Dragon Tiger Mountain, Zhang Tianyi felt bad. There was no difference in the process of the lightning attracting spell. The only difference was the duration of the spell. Mr. Jun Fong was almost immune to lightning spells, so he didn't care how much electric current passed through his body. As long as he continuously absorbed the power of the lightning and released it, the attack wouldn't stop. He would keep releasing until the enemy was smashed into pieces. Zhang Tianyi couldn't do that either. But Mr. Jun Fong seemed to have missed something. The lightning-attracting spell landed on Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao didn't change his position at all. Chapter 27-26. The white light on Chun Zhao's body grew brighter and brighter. Chun Zhao also fully experienced what it felt like to be recharged for 5 minutes and used for 2 hours. An endless stream of electricity filled his body, pouring it into the eye of lightning. His electricity was almost saturated. Chun Zhao suddenly raised his arm and aimed it at Tamamo no Mei. Boom! A terrifying electric arc shot through the sky and landed directly on Tamamo no Mei. Roar! Tamamo no Mei let out a terrifying roar and her huge body crashed to the ground. Mr. Jun immediately stopped the lightning summoning spell. He stared at Chun Zhao in shock. Chun Zhao could actually absorb the power of lightning just like him, and he had the same method as him. Had he also refined his body into a demonic body? But that was impossible. To refine a demonic body, one had to first turn their body into a corpse that wouldn't be restricted by lifespan. Not even the monster race, because even a monster race would die of old age. This was also why Mr. Jun Fong had appeared 1,000 years ago as a 1,000-year-old corpse. To achieve the basic requirements, Mr. Jun Fong had spent 1,000 years. Others thought that he had achieved great success when he was born 1,000 years ago. In reality, he had only achieved small success. The second time he had been sealed for 1,000 years was also part of his plan. It had taken him almost 2,000 years to create a demonic body that could be considered great success. But why was this human in front of him using power so similar to his? Humans couldn't even achieve 1/10 of a demonic body with decades of lifespan. Even if some people could break through the limit, it would still be very limited. 200 years was almost the limit. Just like Bifla, he also relied on the method of abandoning his physical body to live for more than 400 years. But the most important part of cultivating a demonic body was the body. It couldn't be changed at all. Changing a body was equivalent to training all over again. That was why Mr. Jun Fong had first made himself a corpse with thoughts and consciousness. Then he would start cultivating a demonic body. But now, a living person had the demonic body that he had always dreamed of. This caused him to have a mental breakdown. They had said that 100 years of starting and 1,000 years of foundation. Yet, this person had taken out a complete set of 3 years. No one will be happy about this. This made Mr. Jun Fong suspect that he had taken a wrong notebook back then. Or it could be said that later generations had edited a more complete version of his little notebook. Mr. Jun Fong had already listed Chun Zhao on his must-kill list. There is no need for 2 demonic bodies in this world. Mr. Jun Fong was wary of Chun Zhao because they had the same constitution. However, he believed that even if Chun Zhao cultivated a demonic body, Chun Zhao would not be able to be mentioned in the same breath as him. After all, he had spent 2,000 years gathering the strengths of hundreds of schools of thought. In his eyes, Chun Zhao was at most an accelerated version. It definitely didn't have his almost invincible characteristic. At most, it would be a simplified effect of a demonic body. He felt that Chun Zhao's skills could not compare to his. Moreover, he was not only familiar with the advantages of a demonic body, but he was also familiar with its weaknesses. Even a demonic body had its weaknesses. However, this weakness was not really a weakness. The weakness of the demon body was physical attacks. This could not be exempted. However, the demonic body itself could allow a cultivator's body to reach a terrifying level. It had even surpassed the limits of humans and demons, so this weakness was no longer a weakness. Mr. Jun Fong planned to charge forward and fight Chun Zhao. This was the best way to defeat the other demonic body. Seizing the opportunity when Chun Zhao released the power of lightning, Mr. Jun Fong flashed and appeared behind Chun Zhao. For golden fists landed heavily on Chun Zhao's back. Chun Zhao staggered. He looked back and touched the back of his head. Then he looked at Mr. Jun Fong. Chun Zhao had thought that there would be some special bonuses. There would be some side effects if he was hit. So, Chun Zhao did not rush to counterattack. Instead, he waited for his body to react. However, after a long time, there was no reaction. Chun Zhao was a bit confused. Wasn't the attack a bit weak? However, in Mr. Jun Fong's eyes, he thought that Chun Zhao had been stunned by his punch. This made him very proud. It was clearly the stupidest decision to let a demonic body of the same element fight him. He was more familiar with the demonic body than anyone else. So, he decided to continue and try to beat Chun Zhao to death in one go. However, someone moved faster than him. Tamamo no Mei suddenly jumped out of the darkness. Her huge body pounced at Chun Zhao. The terrifying body turned into a ball of fire with terrifying heat waves, as if it could burn everything. Second level of the primordial regression technique, giant spirit transformation. Instantly, Chun Zhao turned into a golden giant. His aura increased 100 times. Mr. Jun Fong immediately flew back 100 meters. Fortunately, Chun Zhao's target was not him this time. Chun Zhao raised his fist and smashed it at Tamamo no Mei. Even though Chun Zhao was in giant spirit transformation, he was still 10,000 times smaller than Tamamo no Mei. So the two still looked like eggs hitting a rock. Tamamo no Mei's aura was overwhelming. When the two collided, Chun Zhao was about to break. But the next moment, Tamamo no Mei was sent flying like a little puppy. The huge burning body drew an arc in the night sky. Those who did not know would think that it was a shooting star. Chun Zhao did not retreat at all, but the ground he was standing on cracked. Fangya and the others were dumbfounded. Fangya was also deeply doubtful of herself. Had she really defeated such a thing on Dragon Tiger Mountain? Mr. Jun Fong was even more shocked. Chun Zhao's golden body was similar to his, but not exactly the same. More importantly, what was up with Chun Zhao's terrifying strength? He had the strength to give Tamamo no Mei a concussion with one punch. Although the demon body strengthened his body, even so, the strengthening was limited. Chun Zhao took a deep breath and looked at Mr. Jun Fong. Third level of the primordial regression technique. Everyone felt a suffocating pressure engulf them. Mr. Jun Fong's gaze turned serious. Now, he finally realized why Chun Zhao gave him the feeling of danger. It was a power that did not belong to the demon body at all. Not only did Chun Zhao not have the weakness of the demon body, but he also had a terrifying power that surpassed the demon body. There was also that specious golden body. They had the same or close to the same magic resistance. But Chun Zhao was even stronger than him. Mr. Jun Fong had to get serious, or rather, go all out. Mr. Jun Fong spread his arms, and 12 beams of golden light appeared behind him. They were 1,200-meter tall, golden men standing behind Mr. Jun Fong. The moonlight shone on the 12 metal men, and the 12 metal men emitted a glass-like radiance. Jun Fong spread open his 6 arms behind him and absorbed the light from the crystal. Chapter 27:27. Chun Zhao, stop him! Zhang Tianyi yelled. Chun Zhao was clearly absorbing the power of the 12 metal men. The right thing to do was to stop him from absorbing. While Chun Zhao wasn't free, he had to deal a fatal blow. Chun Zhao opened his eyes. He sensed that when Mr. Jun Fong absorbed the crystal light from the 12 metal men, his body had formed a special connection with the 12 metal men. This connection couldn't be broken. At least, he couldn't right now. Chun Zhao didn't move. Instead, he continued to use his spiritual power to observe the connection between Mr. Jun Fong and the 12 metal men. Mr. Jun Fong and the 12 metal men seemed to have formed a special formation. Chun Zhao shook his head. He knew that his supernatural knowledge was very shallow. It was probably at the lowest level. If Zhang Tianyi and the others were like academicians of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, then Chun Zhao was like a primary school student. Currently, people who had come into contact with the spiritual world from a young age, or cultivators raised by families, were at least at the university level. From this, It could be seen how shallow Chunjiao was in this area. But strangely, a primary school student like Chunjiao had the ability to see the essence. His inner world had the ability to see the essence. Chunjiao could even analyze the essence of the connection between the 12 metal men and Mr. Junfeng. It was a very special resonance. Mr. Junfeng wasn't just absorbing energy from the 12 metal men. Chunjiao, old Zhang, calm down. Taoist Wushu stopped Zhang Tianyi. That guy and the 12 metal men seemed strange. It's the right decision for Chunjiao not to attack. How? Zhang Tianyi frowned and looked at Chunjiao. It didn't make sense that he couldn't see it, but Chunjiao could. That's the 12 spirits of heaven formation, Taoist Qingping said with a serious expression. What formation is that? Zhang Tianyi wasn't familiar with formations. But looking at Qingping's expression, he also realized that this formation wasn't simple. The 12 capitals are also known as the spirits of the 12 tribes. Back when the Qin Emperor destroyed the 6 kingdoms to unify the world, he didn't just destroy the 6 kingdoms. He also destroyed the 12 kingdoms of the southern border and the northern border. Actually, they were just 12 aboriginal tribes. He slaughtered countless people of the 12 tribes and collected their blood. He then collected the gold of the 6 kingdoms and poured it into the 12 metal men, creating the 12 spirits of the capitals. The 12 spirits of the capitals were originally used to guard the north and south of the heavens. They were used to form the formation of heaven and earth to guard the fate of the nation. The Qin Emperor spent his entire life seeking longevity, and Su Fu was the leader of the medicine concocting cultivators back then. It wouldn't be difficult to swindle the 12 metal men from the Qin Emperor, the immortal Wu Su said. Does this 12 spirits great formation have anything to do with Qin Emperor's original great formation of heaven and earth? Zhang Tianyi asked cautiously. If it was a formation used to guard the fate of a nation, then it would be very troublesome, because he had participated in the current heaven and earth formation. Some small countries had even asked him for help to set up the heaven and earth formation. Therefore, Zhang Tianyi had some understanding of the heaven-earth formation. The core of the heaven-earth formation was not a fixed object. It could be a person or something else. For example, the strongman steel was one of the cores of the heaven-earth formation. However, Huaxia had a vast territory and abundant resources. It wasn't something that a strongman steel could guard. Therefore, there's only one strongman steel. There were 35 other Huaxia divine artifacts guarding the fate of a nation. They worked together to form the heaven-earth formation. However, there were also some small countries that relied on a single object or on the person who had placed the country's fate on. The scale of the heaven-earth formation that they formed was naturally much smaller. Even so, the small-scale heaven-earth formation was almost impossible to break. This was because it required everyone to be united, heaven and earth to be low, and clouds to move in all directions. Unless there was a war between nations, 10,000 hearts against 10,000 hearts, 10,000 blades against 10,000 blades. Only then could they destroy the other party's heaven-earth formation and destroy the fate of a nation. Therefore, if the other party formed the heaven-earth formation, then there was no need to fight. Everyone would return to their own homes and find their own mothers. However, what was certain was that Mr. Junfeng definitely didn't form the heaven-earth formation. He didn't have Huaxia's fate, and he wasn't Ziwei descending into the mortal world. He didn't have a sovereign personage foundation, so it was impossible for him to form the heaven-earth formation. Moreover, the heaven-earth formation of Huaxia was stable and couldn't be replaced. However, according to immortal Qingping, the 12 metal men used to form the heaven-earth formation. Therefore, they had to be cautious. Back then, the Qin dynasty unified the 6 states, but it was destroyed in a day. This had something to do with the disappearance of the 12 metal men. The disappearance of the 12 metal men not only destroyed the heaven-earth formation and lost the fate of the nation, but also the fate of Huaxia, resulting in the 100-year disaster of war. Now that the 12 metal men have reappeared in the world, I'm afraid they still retain the fate of the Qin dynasty. The heaven-earth formation is created by Emperor Qin to control the underworld. It's the opposite of the formation of the nation's fate. The heaven-earth formation is the unity of the people and the unity of heaven and earth. The heaven-earth formation is based on the nether spirits and tens of thousands of resentful spirits. As long as he is within this formation, I'm afraid that old Su is an undying existence. Immortal Wu Su and Zhang Tianyi both inhaled sharply. The heaven-earth formation was the opposite of the heaven-earth formation, but the principle was extremely similar. Even if it was a pirated version, even if it was a simplified version, that would make the situation they were facing extremely troublesome. This formation needs the nether spirits as the foundation, right? Nowadays, no one worships the Qin dynasty, not even the ghosts of the underworld. His heaven-earth formation probably can't unleash its full power, right? Zhang Tianyi raised his doubts. Immortal Qing Ping nodded, but the haze between his brows did not dissipate. That's indeed the case. Back then, when the Qin emperor passed away, he wanted to bury 1 million great Qin soldiers in armor to form the foundation of the 12 heavenly spirits formation. However, because the 12 metal colossi disappeared, he was unable to do so. However, the 12 metal colossi were forged from the blood of 1 million indigenous people and the gold of the 6 nations. Even though they are missing the souls of 1 million great Qin soldiers, they are still incredibly mighty. Everyone looked at Chun Zhao, their faces filled with worry. Who would have thought that this 1,000-year-old corpse was the former #1 warlock of the Qin dynasty, Su Fu? What was even more unexpected was that Su Fu had such a trump card. Not only had he cultivated an almost invincible demonic body, but he also had the 12 metal men and the heaven-earth formation. He also had the 12 metal men and the heaven-earth formation. Or rather, the 12 metal men and the heaven-earth formation were all part of his plan. In the past, the Qin dynasty had unified the world. Everything about the first emperor was all part of his plan. If that was really the case, then it was too terrifying. A person who controlled the world and the first emperor like chess pieces. He had even schemed until today, 2,000 years later. This kind of method was already an inhuman plan. Chapter 27-28. To put it bluntly, old monster Kun Lai, who'd schemed for 1,000 years for the 1,000-year bloodline, was much weaker than Mr. Jun Fong in both ability and methods. Even a peerless genius like the first emperor had been toyed with by Mr. Jun Fong. Over the course of 1,000 years, while he was sealed, he had schemed against 2 successors of the 3 mountains who had been separated by 1,000 years. Even the time of his awakening had been carefully planned. At the end of the spiritual tide, the power of the spiritual world was greatly reduced. The number of experts could be counted on one hand. The next spiritual tide wasn't too far away either. It could be said that this was the best time to enter the world. Everyone's expression turned solemn. However, Chun Zhao's thoughts were much simpler. Mr. Jun Fong glanced at Chun Zhao. The 12 gold men seemed to have fused with him. He felt like he could tear the world apart. Mr. Jun Fong casually swung his arm, and a ravine appeared in the ground before Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao tilted his body slightly and dodged the attack. Right now, Mr. Jun Fong gave him a very bad feeling. The connection between him and the 12 gold men was very subtle. It was like an intricate electronic component, but the structure was very sturdy. Mr. Jun Fong's aura and power had reached an incomprehensible level. Even old monster Kun Lai's power couldn't compare to Mr. Jun Fong's. This quantitative change had already caused a qualitative change. Every movement of his was filled with terrifying power. It was like a giant facing an ant. Even a meaningless movement could be fatal to the ant. Chun Zhao didn't want to be the ant, so he had to change his current situation. Even if he was an ant, he had to be a strong ant. Zhang Tianyi looked at Chun Zhao and suddenly felt that his aura had changed. Zhang Tianyi's expression changed. He waved his hand and immediately protected Fanya and the others behind him. A red pattern started from Chun Zhao's body and started spreading outwards. Then it was a dense and complicated pattern that spread wider and wider. In the end, everything within 2,000 meters was completely covered by the red pattern. That's Fanya looked at Zhang Tianyi in confusion, seeking his explanation. His little world, Zhang Tianyi said. But why did it become like this? Enlightened Master Wu Su and Enlightened Master Qing Ping were also confused. The three of them also had their own small worlds of different sizes. However, the composition of their small worlds were all the same. They were all filled with heaven and earth spiritual qi. However, Chun Zhao's small world was filled with scorching heat. Every heavenly pattern was filled with violent heat. How much flame qi was needed to fill the entire small world? Chun Zhao himself did not know how much flame qi he had absorbed during his seclusion. In the underground magma river of Mount Chogo, Chun Zhao absorbed billions of tons of magma. Then, he tempered the flame qi in the magma and absorbed the magma again. He repeated the process, absorbing and tempering. The power of the inner world was endless. The more powerful one's heart was, the more powerful one would be. Chun Zhao also wanted to know how much power his body could take. The heavenly rune, which was infused with flame energy, fused with his body. Chun Zhao's body was covered in red patterns. The densely packed heavenly patterns were like a tattoo he was born with. But this wasn't enough. Flame qi wasn't Chun Zhao's best power system. Chun Zhao needed to convert flame qi into the power he was most familiar with. Chun Zhao closed his eyes and sensed every corner of his body. Soon, he completed the development of a body. Chun Zhao turned his body into an engine, using flame qi as the energy source. He also increased the output. Chun Zhao included this state in the primordial regression technique. The fourth level, the fourth form. Normally, Chun Zhao would maintain the first form of the primordial regression technique. Then, when he encountered a stronger opponent, he would activate the second level, giant spirit form. Actually, the Jin form was like drinking water to Chun Zhao. However, the Jin form wasn't convenient for Chun Zhao's daily life, so he wouldn't maintain it. The third level of the primordial regression technique, 10,000 techniques return to 1, would only be used when facing an evenly matched opponent. But right now, even the third level, 10,000 techniques return to 1, wasn't enough to deal with Mr. Junfang. Thus, Chun Zhao had to activate the fourth level on the spot. He'd tried this a few times before. It wasn't successful. However, the subtle connection between Mr. Junfang and the 12 metal men gave Chun Zhao inspiration. The connection was subtle, but it wasn't too complicated for Chun Zhao. At least, with the scan of his inner world, he could sense the connection between Mr. Junfang and the 12 metal men. Some of the connections could be used on an individual. More accurately, it could be used on Chun Zhao himself. Actually, in the formation formed by Mr. Junfang and the 12 metal men, it wasn't suitable to be used on an individual. The transfer and operation of the energy wasn't something an individual could handle. The 12 metal men were the energy source, which transferred the energy to Mr. Junfang. They seemed to be individuals, but they'd actually formed a highly precise energy supply relationship. This energy supply relationship couldn't be destroyed by a single person. Moreover, the energy released by this combination was shocking. An individual couldn't handle it. It was like a rocket engine. It couldn't be installed in a car. But Chun Zhao was different. This operation method didn't even reach his upper limit. It was even more advanced than Chun Zhao's current power system. It should be said that in the past, Chun Zhao's power output had always been rough. He didn't have much technique to speak of. Most of the time, Chun Zhao used strength to suppress others. But now, Chun Zhao found a more technical method. He could adjust the output of his power. That was the fourth form. Chun Zhao called it the tyrant form. Tamaname retreated like her hair stood on end. Her beast instincts had already sensed the fatal danger from Chun Zhao. It was as if getting close would kill her. At the same time, Mr. Junfang looked at Chun Zhao. The distance between him and Chun Zhao seemed to distort. The next moment, Mr. Junfang appeared before Chun Zhao. Distance reduction. Zhang Tianyi raised an eyebrow. No, it's heaven and earth inversion, Taoist Wushu said with a serious expression. Mr. Junfang was so fast that even Chun Zhao couldn't react. Mr. Jun Fang's sword landed on Chun Zhao's neck in an instant. The blade was already halfway in. A smile appeared on Mr. Jun Fang's face. But the expressions of Zhang Tianyi and the others changed drastically. After Mr. Jun Fang activated the 12 Heavenly Spirits formation, the difference between the two was already so great. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 27-29. Just when everyone thought that Chun Zhao had lost, Chun Zhao suddenly threw a punch. The Kusanagi sword in Mr. Jun's hand shattered instantly. Mr. Jun Fang was shocked. Chun Zhao swept out again, and his fist landed on Mr. Jun Fang's chest. Whoosh! All the flesh and blood from Mr. Jun Fang's chest to his right shoulder flew out instantly. Mr. Jun Fang was also sent flying by the terrifying force. Chun Zhao touched his neck. It was very uncomfortable to have his neck cut open. However, his powerful vitality and the recovery ability of the Nirvana Flame healed the wound almost instantly. Even Zhang Tianyi, perfected Wushu, and perfected Qingping were dumbfounded, let alone Fangya and the other young people. Half of his neck had been cut in, but he seemed to be fine. Tamanome's hair stood on end. That was the Kusanagi sword. The Kusanagi sword's divinity was gone, but the Kusanagi was still a divine weapon. Together with Mr. Jun Fang's magic power, it didn't matter if he had divinity or not. Even so, even though Chun Zhao had been hit, it didn't achieve the desired effect. Jun Bangsin stood up again and glanced at his empty chest. The 12 gold colossi immediately changed the power they sent over. The crystal light suddenly turned red. Mr. Jun Fang's chest also started recovering. However, it was obvious that the new flesh on Jun Fang's chest was different from the original. Fangya and the other young people had never seen a battle of this level. Therefore, to them, this battle was more like a battle between immortals. Power of the border worshippers. Jun Fang shouted. The 12 gold colossi suddenly exploded with a golden light. Even more magic power entered Mr. Jun Fang's body. A gigantic, almost corporeal body appeared behind Mr. Jun. What spell is that? Is it a Dharma? That's the southern border's god inviting spell. Are you kidding? Can a god invite something like that? Even a main body isn't that powerful, right? Taoists also had god-inviting spells, but normal third-rate gods would probably be pressed to the ground by human experts, even if they came in person. Because of the complicated beliefs in southern border, there were all kinds of gods. Among the various gods, there were almost no mainstream gods. As for those so-called gods, some of them were actually transformed from gremlins. Compared to the real immortals, there was a huge difference in strength. However, the figure summoned by the god-inviting spell was no longer a third-rate god. Even if it was just a clone, it was already shocking enough. If this deity were to descend, how mighty would it be? Do those mountain spirits and wild monsters of the southern border really have such a powerful god? That's not some mountain spirit or wild monster. Border Zhu has another name in the Central Plains, Zhurong. Taoist master Wu Su said, he's an ancient god. How is this possible? How could an ancient god invite a god? Ordinary methods naturally won't work, but this heavenly 12 spirits formation can. Mr. Jun Fang pointed at Chun Zhao. The giant god behind him also raised his fist. When it passed through the air, it created a scorching heat. The surrounding forests were also set ablaze by the high temperature. The fiend god-like giant fist was like a falling meteor, as if it was going to shatter the mountains, rivers, and heavens. Before even touching it, Chun Zhao already felt an overwhelming pressure. The ground was torn apart, and the flames of the burning plants were suppressed to the point where they couldn't even rise, making it difficult for them to spread upwards. Chun Zhao faced the giant fist with all his strength. Starting from the fist that touched Chun Zhao's fist, red crystals started spreading upward. Then the whole body, followed by an ear-piercing sound of friction. Clang! Everyone heard a sound like a mirror breaking. Whoosh! The giant body disintegrated instantly. Red crystals rained down. The darkness of the night seemed to be shattered along with it. A strange crack was left in the sky. Chen Zhao didn't know how powerful that blow was. He only knew to turn the power to the maximum and then punch to his heart's content. After Chen Zhao threw that punch, he seemed to have been enlightened. He suddenly knew how to use his inner world. Chen Zhao stomped his foot, and the ground suddenly poured into the ground. Then, huge red crystal pillars that were hundreds of meters tall rose from the ground. Everything within a radius of several kilometers was covered by the red crystal pillars. These pillars were products of Chen Zhao's inner world. Now, Chen Zhao could spread it out and materialize the red crystal pillars in his inner world. Zhang Tianyi, spiritual master Wushu, and spiritual master Qingping all gasped. This is truly breathtaking. Even Zhang Tianyi, who'd always thought that he was on par with Chen Zhao, had to admit it. Chen Zhao wasn't just one step ahead of him. This was also Chen Zhao's first time using this move. Within the range of the red crystal pillars, Chen Zhao felt that his power could increase infinitely. At least, he couldn't feel the limit at all right now. Chen Zhao raised his arm and controlled his power according to the instructions in his mind. A few red crystal pillars suddenly exploded. Red dust whizzed in the air, but it didn't dissipate completely. Instead, it turned into a body dozens of times larger than Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao was a bit surprised, but he could clearly feel that the body formed from his power had the same power as him. It wasn't his avatar, but a clone of his power. Seeing Chen Zhao's change, Mr. Jun's expression turned serious. At this moment, just like Tamamo no Mei, he also felt a fatal danger. But he had nowhere to go now. If he couldn't defeat Chen Zhao, he had nowhere to run. Of course, if he defeated Chen Zhao, he wouldn't have to run anymore. So, he had to use all his power to control the 12 metal colossi and have them give him all their power. Unless he had no other choice, Mr. Jun wouldn't even use the 12 metal colossi, let alone use them at full power. Using the 12 metal colossi would put immense pressure on his body, especially when he used them at full power. Even his demonic body couldn't bear the boundless power when he used them at full power. Even when he fought against the 3 sect leaders 1,000 years ago, he hadn't used the 12 metal colossi at full power. But this time, he felt that if he was lucky or held back, he might be crushed by Chen Zhao. This man gave him even more pressure than when the 3 sect leaders worked together 1,000 years ago. Finally, Mr. Jun felt that his body had reached a critical point. His body turned from gold to a dark gold. The 12 heavenly spirits formation was a reversed version of the formation of heaven and earth. It relied on the power of the nether spirits. The nether spirits' power and Mr. Jun's own power fused perfectly. It was even greatly enhanced. Mr. Jun's aura had increased by more than 10 times. Chapter 2730. With a thought from Chen Zhao, the red crystal clone had already attacked. Only a red arc was left in the night sky as it crashed toward Mr. Junfang. However, the clone only crashed into the barrier set up by Mr. Junfang's power. It didn't break the barrier, but Mr. Junfang's body and mind were still shaken. There was no trick to this terrifying power. It was a head-on attack. Chen Zhao controlled the clone to raise its arm and attack the barrier again. The violent tremors seemed to affect the surroundings. Red cracks spread in the night sky. Of course, they weren't spatial cracks. Instead, Chen Zhao's power spread in the air. Because of its element, the red cracks appeared in the air. Dying. The power of thousands of ghosts slammed into the clone. The crystal red doppelganger instantly disintegrated. The clone couldn't resist at all. It collapsed at the first touch. However, the floating red powder circled in the air for a while and reformed with a whirlwind. Chen Zhao's clone attacked Mr. Junfang's barrier again. The fire in the forest raged. It wasn't a good thing, but it also brought Chen Zhao a huge amount of fire energy. It wasn't a good thing, but also brought Chen Zhao a huge amount of fire energy. It wasn't much compared to the amount Chen Zhao had absorbed from the underground magma, but it was better than nothing. At least it could replenish Chen Zhao's energy. Red cracks kept flashing in the sky. They looked like red lightning bolts. Every strike was a heavy blow to everyone's heart. Chun Zhao rested for a few minutes. The clone didn't rest at all. It kept attacking Mr. Junfang's barrier. But the barrier didn't move at all. It reminded Chun Zhao of Zhang Tiany's primordial bell. Chun Zhao had considered this before. One way to break the primordial bell was to fight Zhang Tiany until the end of time. The second way was to reach the upper limit of the primordial bell in an instant. However, it was almost impossible to reach the upper limit of Zhang Tiany's defense in an instant, especially with the primordial chaos flood bell's extremely powerful defensive spell. Mr. Junfang could be seen as someone at Zhang Tiany's level, or perhaps it was an existence stronger than him. So, his defensive spell wouldn't be weaker than Zhang Tiany's. Therefore, it was almost impossible to forcefully break through it. Of course, there was a third method. To be precise, it was a variation of a second method. If he couldn't reach the upper limit in an instant, in that case, he would have to attack more frequently. Although he couldn't break through the opponent's defense, his pure strength wasn't completely blocked. It was like a person wearing a bulletproof vest. When bullets hit the bulletproof vest, although most of the potential energy and fatal damage could be mitigated, the bullet would not be able to withstand it. However, it would still injure the user of the bulletproof vest. This was the method Chun Zhao had thought of to deal with Zhang Tiany. Chun Zhao raised his arm, and all the red crystal pillars shattered. Then, dozens of crystal red clones appeared in front of everyone. These clones had the same power as Chun Zhao's real body. Although they were Chun Zhao's clones, they were actually the same as Chun Zhao. However, there were also limitations to their usage. The flame chi they needed was a consumable. It is not infinite. If Chun Zhao wanted to continue using this move, in that case, he would have to go through the same process as last time. Moreover, the crystal red doppelganger's range of movement was also limited. The crystal red doppelganger could barely leave the range of Chun Zhao's small world. But the further they went, the weaker Chun Zhao's senses would be. The weaker Chun Zhao's senses were, the weaker they would be. Because they were the materialization of Chun Zhao's power, their every move was controlled by Chun Zhao's spiritual power. Nevertheless, the dozens of crystal red doppelganger were still very shocking. Chun Zhao waved his arm, and all the crystal red doppelganger charged forward. Boom, boom, boom. Red lightning almost lit up the sky. Mr. Junfang had tried. No matter how many crystal red doppelganger he destroyed, no matter how many times he destroyed them, the crystal red doppelganger would recover instantly. These crystal red doppelganger weren't made of flesh and blood. They didn't have any consciousness. They were just the materialization of Chun Zhao's power. It was almost impossible to destroy them, unless he could wait until they ran out of energy. Pooh! Mr. Junfang spat out a mouthful of black blood. His barrier finally couldn't hold on any longer. Or rather, his body couldn't take it anymore. As for the barrier he had set up, even the 12 golden men had a barely detectable crack on it. After all, the 12 heavenly spirits formation wasn't complete. It wasn't an orthodox heaven and earth formation either. It still lacked a lot of key things. Moreover, the power of the 12 golden men wasn't endless, especially in a battle of this level. Mr. Junfang had activated the 12 golden men. He was basically killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. However, Chun Zhao was too much of a threat to him. He had no choice. If he didn't use the 12 golden men, he would die even faster. A few crystal red doppelganger tore a hole in the barrier together. Then a crystal red doppelganger dove in. Seal. Mr. Junfang had to use part of his power to suppress the crystal red doppelganger. A black talisman hit the crystal red doppelganger. The doppelganger's body was immediately wrapped in darkness. Although the crystal red doppelganger had the same power as Chun Zhao, its defense and resistance were very weak. Mr. Junfang had long discovered the crystal red doppelganger's weakness. However, under that almost immortal characteristic, it could not be destroyed. The so-called weakness wasn't that important anymore. Just then, the crystal red doppelganger suddenly grinned. Mr. Junfeng had a bad feeling. Have you tried self-destruction before? The crystal red doppelganger asked, looking at Mr. Junfeng. You should know that I'm resistant to fire spells. Even if you self-destruct, you won't be able to hurt me, Mr. Junfeng said with a cold snort. Huh, you're not afraid, but aren't the golden men afraid too? The crystal red doppelganger laughed. Plus, in an enclosed environment, the power of the explosion will increase by 100 times. Mr. Junfeng's heart skipped a beat. Oh no! At this moment, he had fallen into a situation where he could only advance or retreat. If he didn't open the barrier and the crystal red doppelganger self-destructed, it might hurt the 12 spirits formation or even damage the 12 golden men. But if he opened the barrier, the dozens of crystal red doppelganger and Chun Zhao's real body would be eyeing him. One Chun Zhao was already a headache. Now, there were dozens of crystal red doppelganger. Mr. Junfeng felt that he could just wait for death. Of course, Mr. Junfeng still wanted to struggle. Mr. Junfeng sent another black seal at the crystal red doppelganger. Huh? You want to stop me from self-destructing? Looks like it's useful. You slowed down my self-destruction, Chun Zhao said through the crystal red doppelganger. Chapter 2731. Mr. Junfeng knew many spells, but he didn't know much about how to stop others from self-destructing. All he could do now was delay the explosion of Chun Zhao's crystal clones, slowing down the energy flow in Chun Zhao's clones. But this method clearly didn't solve the problem. Slowing down the explosion couldn't guarantee safety. Moreover, he had to stop the clone from self-destructing. He also had to use a portion of his power to suppress it. This made his situation even more unfavorable. Chun Zhao used the same trick again. Another hole was torn open, and this time, 2 crystal red doppelgangers entered. Mr. Junfeng didn't even give them time to react. He sealed the 2 clones. However, at that moment, one of the crystal red doppelgangers began to expand rapidly. Oh no! How is this possible? Terrifying energy was released instantly. The entire sky was dyed red. Mr. Junfeng was also swallowed by the impact. Fanya and the others all opened their mouths wide and looked at the doomsday-like scene in astonishment. How can this be? Perfected Master Qingping was confused. Perfected Wu Su and Zhang Tianyi could tell that something was wrong. Chun Zhao had his clone self-destruct in advance. When his clone entered Old Man Su's barrier, it did so Old Man Su wasn't prepared at all. He thought that these 2 clones were the same as the first one and only self-destructed after entering. Perfected Master Wu Su looked at the sky, full of red light. Are you sure this is okay? This place is remote, but such a large-scale phenomenon can't be hidden from ordinary people. I've already talked to the person in charge, Zhang Tianyi said calmly. They're ready at any time. Once there's a phenomenon that exceeds the scale, they'll announce that it was caused by a meteorite. Perfected Master Wu Su nodded. When he looked at Chun Zhao, his eyes were filled with complicated emotions. No wonder you invited him to participate in this operation. Too bad. He's not from Kunlun. If he could join us, the next 200 years of Huaxia's supernatural world would belong to Kunlun. Perfected Master Qingping looked at Chun Zhao's figure and kept thinking. Perfected Master Wu Su's words made her even more certain. The red light gradually dissipated. The first thing that appeared in the sky were 12 golden giants. However, the 12 golden giants were already broken. Thick yin qi emanated from the broken body. These 12 gigantic bodies could no longer contain the yin qi contained within them. It was the yin spirit energy refined from the flesh and blood of millions of people. There was also Mr. Junfeng, who stood in the middle of the 12 golden men. His body was no less damaged than the 12 golden men. His body was covered with burn marks left behind by the raging flames. In the end, the 12 heavenly spirits formation was destroyed. He had no way of stopping it. I want you dead, Junfeng roared angrily. Spirit of Duqian, obey me. The 12 golden men suddenly melted into a golden liquid and fused into Mr. Junfeng's body. Jun Bangsan absorbed all of the 12 metal colossi's power in one go. His aura suddenly became sinister and terrifying. He was like a living ghost king, but he was more terrifying than any ghost king in the world. Mr. Jun Fong pounced at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao punched back without hesitation. Mr. Jun Fong scratched Chen Zhao's chest. Chen Zhao also punched Mr. Jun's chest. Chen Zhao's chest was scratched, leaving 3 shocking black marks. Half of Mr. Jun Fong's body was smashed into pieces. However, after smashing half of Mr. Jun Fong's body, a huge amount of Yin spirit energy immediately filled the gap. However, after filling the gap, it was no longer flesh and blood. Instead, it was filled with endless wailing resentment. It was a nauseating substance that emitted the wails of ghosts and gods that made one's scalp numb. Chen Zhao immediately forced out the Yin spirit energy contained in the black scar on his chest. At the same time, he had the crystal clone keep Mr. Jun Fong busy. Mr. Jun Fong didn't dodge at all. He fought with all his might. Mr. Jun Fong had already found a way to deal with the crystal clones. He didn't shatter them. Instead, he sent the Yin spirit energy into the crystal clone's body. The crystal clone wouldn't lose its ability to move for a short while. The Yin spirit energy would affect Chen Zhao's control over the crystal clone. One had to admit that Mr. Jun Fong's experience was even greater than everyone else's combined. Soon, the dozens of crystal clones lost their use and froze in place. Red and black interweaved on the crystal clones' bodies. 2 forces were fighting inside them. However, the red power clearly had the upper hand. Soon, the black power would be forced back. Mr. Jun Fong knew this too, so he had to use this time to defeat Chen Zhao. As long as he defeated Chen Zhao, there was still hope. In this battle, either Chen Zhao or he would die. Chen Zhao didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced. He'd never been afraid of anyone in a physical fight. Since Mr. Jun had hit him once, he returned the favor with a tooth for a tooth. The 2 fought from the ground to the sky, then back to the ground. Both of them were using their strengths. Even the mountains and rivers were about to be shattered by them. Chen Zhao had never used so much life force before. After all, every time he repaired his body, he needed a huge amount of life force. On the other hand, Mr. Jun Fong's body had been shattered countless times by Chen Zhao. Right now, Mr. Jun Fong's Yin spirit energy had covered most of his body. Even his head was covered in it. Old Su seems to have lost control, perfected Wu Su said. There are millions of Yin spirits, Zhang Tianyi said solemnly. They've also been imprisoned by the 12 metal men for 2,000 years. If their resentment is released, it'll be more terrifying than a nuclear explosion. Every time Chen Zhao destroys Old Su's body, he's one step closer to losing control. Perfected Qing Ping's expression was also solemn. If we don't think of a way to completely destroy Old Su, the final result might be the Yin spirits completely controlling his body and nurturing a peerless demon fetus. In the past, they'd seen some evil cultivators use unorthodox methods to nurture demon fetus. However, those people only used dozens or hundreds of Yin spirits and dared to claim that they had nurtured a peerless demon fetus. But Mr. Jun Fong was different. There were millions of Yin spirits. The quantitative change had already caused a qualitative change. They all knew that they had to completely destroy Mr. Jun Fong to win. But how could they completely destroy Mr. Jun Fong? Chen Zhao. Zhang Tianyi's expression was conflicted. Suddenly, he sent Chen Zhao a telepathic message. Chen Zhao turned around and looked at Zhang Tianyi, confusion in his eyes. Zhang Tianyi's lips twitched. Chen Zhao's expression changed. Chapter 2732. In the end, Chen Zhao nodded. Zhang Tianyi snickered. Both Taoist Wushu and Qingping looked at Zhang Tianyi in confusion. Then they turned to Chen Zhao. They must have talked about something. Chen Zhao didn't seem very willing. Zhang Tianyi suddenly made a seal with both hands. Both Taoist Wushu and Qingping wanted to see what was going on. Unfortunately, Zhang Tianyi's spell wasn't something they'd seen before. Just as Taoist Wushu and Qingping were confused, Zhang Tiany's spell was complete, but he didn't use it on Mr. Junfang. It was on Chun Zhao. The two were shocked again. What was going on? That spell just now was obviously an offensive spell. Even the two of them could feel the malice of the spell. Why would it be used on Chun Zhao? Was Zhang Tiany a spy? Of course, this thought only flashed past their minds. Because Chun Zhao didn't resist at all. The spell accurately hit Chun Zhao. Just then, Chun Zhao's aura suddenly fell silent. Mr. Junfang retreated abruptly. He didn't know what was going on. Moreover, he was aware of his current state. If he allowed the evil spirits to continue corroding his body, then he wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being completely corroded by the evil spirits. But facing Chun Zhao, he couldn't hide or retreat at all. He could only take a breather for now. He could feel that Chun Zhao's sudden silence was like a volcano about to erupt. Just then, the crystal clones suddenly disappeared. Panting, Mr. Junfang stared at Chun Zhao. The uneasiness was spreading. The crystal red powder didn't disperse. Instead, it gathered behind Chun Zhao and then stuck to his skin. It seemed like something bad was about to happen. Suddenly, Chun Zhao lifted his head. His round eyes flashed with scarlet light, and his open mouth was dripping with saliva. Right now, Chun Zhao didn't seem like a person. He was more like a beast. It was like a starving beast. Under the red powder, Chun Zhao's skin looked like lava. Run. That was the only thought in Mr. Junfang's mind, even though he knew that running in the middle of a battlefield was the stupidest decision. But instinct still won over reason. Mr. Junfang turned to run, but Chun Zhao was like a beast. Run and sprint on all fours. He instantly appeared in front of Jun Bangsan, blocking his escape route. Enlightened being Wu Su and enlightened being Qingping were both surprised. He couldn't help but look at Zhang Tiany. They obviously needed Zhang Tiany's help. Zhang Tiany looked at Chun Zhao's current state with satisfaction. What Jun Bangsan felt right now wasn't danger. It was not just dangerous. Junfang unhesitatingly reached out with his demonized claws. But Chun Zhao faced him with a lava claw as well. Junfang's demonized claw was torn off by Chun Zhao's lava claw. But Chun Zhao didn't throw it away. Instead, he brought it to his face and bit it. At this moment, everyone was pissed off. Junfang finally understood where this feeling came from. The man in front of him didn't want to kill him. It wanted to eat him. Chun Zhao threw down his withered arm. Meanwhile, Chun Zhao kept chewing. Chun Zhao devoured the essence, blood, Junfang's demonic qi, and the power of the undead spirits. After all the power was devoured, the arm revealed its original appearance. Junfang couldn't help but take a few steps back. Look at you now. Aren't we the same kind? We're on the same side. Chun Zhao slowly raised his head and stared at Junfang dangerously. Same kind? I'm different from you. Chun Zhao suddenly pounced at Junfang. Stop. Do you want to become a demon? Chun Zhao grabbed a piece of Junfang's flesh. The piece of flesh seemed to have been cursed. It emitted an ominous aura and power. Chun Zhao didn't reject it. He devoured it directly. Enlightened being Wu Su and perfected being Qingping looked at Chun Zhao's terrifying man-eating appearance. Old Zhang, what do you mean by this? Even if he's not from Dragon Tiger Mountain, there's no need to destroy him. Perfected being Qingping was rather angry. After all, she had secretly designated Chun Zhao as the leader of Mao Mountain or even an elder. You said that I destroyed him? What a joke. How can that kid be destroyed so easily? But now, do you think he's lost his mind? Zhang Tiany looked at Chun Zhao. You haven't seen what he looks like when he loses his mind. If he really did, he would open his mouth and eat Old Su instead of just absorbing the power of the undead. You're letting him absorb millions of thousand-year-old undead. You're harming him. If he becomes crazy, you won't be able to absolve yourself from the blame. Don't worry. His digestive ability is very good. Very good, Zhang Tiany said. After all, he can swallow the serpent and come lie alive. That's not his limit. Zhang Tiany had discovered something special about Chun Zhao when he was hit by the 9 Viscera techniques. It was Chun Zhao's shocking digestive ability. It wasn't strange for him to swallow the flesh and essence of either of them. However, the serpent and Kunlai both walked the extreme path of cultivation. Their flesh and blood had long been tempered to the point of danger. But Chun Zhao felt like he had just finished eating beef and then had a big bowl of seafood noodles. There were no adverse reactions at all. At least, Chun Zhao didn't explode. Instead, he received unprecedented satisfaction. This made Zhang Tianyi feel that Chun Zhao's digestive ability had already surpassed the range of ordinary people. As for the 9 viscera techniques, Chun Zhao had been in seclusion for a few days. Zhang Tianyi hadn't been idle either, because Imohan was stranded on Dragon Tiger Mountain. It wasn't difficult for Zhang Tianyi to dig something out of him. The 9 viscera techniques were Zhang Tianyi's spoils of war. Of course, Zhang Tianyi only needed one look to know the characteristics of the 9 viscera techniques. In another 2 days, Zhang Tianyi had improved the 9 viscera techniques. What Chun Zhao was hit by now was the improved 9 viscera techniques. It directly stimulated his appetite to the extreme, which was the appetite of the old version of the 9 viscera techniques when he lost control. It didn't need to take a few days to brew. At the same time, he would retain some rationality so that the person hit wouldn't completely lose control. Of course, the new version of the 9 viscera techniques that Zhang Tianyi had developed wasn't for ordinary people. If he used it to take revenge on his enemies, he didn't lack such spells. It didn't matter if he had the 9 viscera techniques or not. Zhang Tianyi's real target was Chun Zhao. Only Chun Zhao was suitable to use this move. Only Chun Zhao could withstand this beast-like appetite. At the same time, he had a monstrous appetite and an inhuman digestive ability. Moreover, Chun Zhao had experience with this. Other than Chun Zhao, probably no one could withstand such terrifying side effects. And now, this side effect was the key to turning the situation around. Chapter 2733. Of course, maintaining his rationality was so that he wouldn't eat everything. For example, Chun Zhao didn't want to eat Mr. Junfang, although he was not a human now. But in essence, he was still human. Whether it was from the material structure of his body or from his mode of thinking, he was still human, so Chun Zhao really couldn't do it. He was also a picky eater. Therefore, the 9 viscera techniques could overcome Chun Zhao's pickiness. At the very least, Jun Fongsan's yin energy was no longer so difficult to swallow. Chun Zhao crushed a piece of flesh that had lost all its dark spirit power. Do you think this power is some kind of panacea? You'll end up like me, killed by another monster. Jun Fong roared as he struggled helplessly. In his eyes, Chun Zhao was a monster. You're not far from becoming a demon. Have you heard of the theory that demonized people are 3 times stronger? Chun Zhao's lava claw pressed down on Jun Fong's head and then pressed down heavily. A terrifying amount of yin spiritual energy gushed out from the hole in Jun Fong's head like a geyser. Chun Zhao opened his mouth and poured the dark spirit power into his body. Chun Zhao felt that his appetite was big enough. In the past, Chun Zhao had also devoured the negative emotions of the scumbags in American prisons. It was also in the millions. At the time, Chun Zhao didn't think it was a big deal. But now, Chun Zhao realized that he had still underestimated the power of evil spirits. This thing was much more advanced than the monsters materialized from negative emotions. At least, Chun Zhao felt full now. But being full meant that you could probably eat more. Moreover, if something like yin spirit energy were to leak out, it could probably make the entire Qinling Mountains barren. About the same as nuclear waste. Therefore, even if he had to force himself, he had to swallow the nuclear waste from the supernatural world. In the past, Chun Zhao thought that he wasn't very responsible. But now, he wished that he didn't have any sense of responsibility. A sense of responsibility was really troublesome. Especially in big trouble, the sense of responsibility would become even more troublesome. Chun Zhao's understanding of the inner world allowed him to be as powerful as his heart. However, one's appetite couldn't depend on their imagination. All Chun Zhao could do now was compress the dark power. He had to compress the yin energy as much as possible. However, compressing Yin spirit power and compressing air were two different things. Moreover, compression inside the body was not the same thing as compression outside the body. With Chun Zhao's current abilities, if he went all out, he could even compress a mountain into a basketball. But in his stomach, even if he used all his strength, he couldn't do that. This dark power was not much more difficult than the other types of energy he had absorbed or assimilated in the past. The main problem was that the quantity was too large. Finally, Chun Zhao was full. He could only let the dark lava devour him. In fact, the dark magma didn't care what it ate. The final direction was still himself. However, he could treat the dark lava as his other stomach. But dark lava's situation was similar. The dark lava couldn't devour more food than Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao felt that he needed to change his stomach or digestive system. Chun Zhao wasn't afraid of bursting himself. He wouldn't burst anyway. In fact, when a person is full, most of the time, their stomach doesn't explode. On the contrary, if a person ate too much, they would only spit it out. Even though Chun Zhao had been affected by the 9 viscera techniques, he couldn't eat endlessly. The 9 viscera techniques only needed to be full, and the 9 viscera techniques would dissolve itself. Even after Zhang Tiany's improved 9 viscera techniques, he still couldn't get rid of this condition. In that instant, Chun Zhao felt a sense of satisfaction. He could clearly feel his appetite rapidly disappearing. At the same time, Mr. Junfang's body was still emitting large amounts of Yin spirit power. It was as if his body contained limitless Yin spirit power. Of course, for a normal person, the Yin spirit power he had could indeed be called limitless. In just a few breaths, the escaping Yin spirit power had gathered into a black cloud in the sky. Zhang Tiany, think of a way. Chun Zhao turned around and roared. No way, unless you can resurrect that Sufu old ghost. Chun Zhao clearly couldn't accept this result. After all, he'd gone through so much trouble to kill the enemy. Now, he had to personally revive him. He would be crazy to accept this reason. Moreover, once Mr. Junfang revived, they would probably be in trouble. It was even possible that Mr. Junfang would use this opportunity to threaten them. Therefore, Chun Zhao definitely wouldn't revive Mr. Junfang. Chun Zhao took a deep breath. He looked around. The black cloud in the sky was getting thicker and thicker. The fire in the forest was also starting to die out because of the Yin spirit power. This possibility was only 1 in 10,000. If all the Yin spirit power spread out, everything within 1,000 miles might become a forbidden zone for life. Chun Zhao had an idea. He grabbed Mr. Junfang's body. He opened his mouth again and sucked the Yin spirit power into his body. This time, he wasn't using the Yin spirit power as food. He was guiding the Yin spirit power into his inner world. Chun Zhao's appetite was limited. However, his inner world could contain limitless energy. Of course, Chun Zhao had already developed a unique method of channeling his qi. It was a breathing method that only suited him and the flame qi. Therefore, he hastily sucked the Yin spirit power into his inner world. This wasn't a wise decision. Of course, Chun Zhao could also choose to let it go. He could just leave. After all, Chun Zhao had already done everything he could. He had basically done all Zhang Tiany's requests. However, after thinking for a long time, Chun Zhao still decided to do his last bit. Chun Zhao didn't just absorb the Yin spirit power from Mr. Junfang's body. He also absorbed the Yin spirit power that had dissipated earlier. As Chun Zhao continuously absorbed the Yin spirit power, the Yin spirit power almost dyed his inner world black. However, the flame qi quickly took back the initiative and completely suppressed the Yin spirit power. Although the Yin spirit power was huge, it was still ownerless. It wouldn't actively attack or defend, and Chun Zhao could control the flame qi. However, Chun Zhao remembered that the conflict and opposition between the flame qi and Yin spirit power was very similar to old Monster Kunlai's original cultivation method. It was a cultivation method after absorbing Yin and Yang qi. Although the path and method of operation were different, the idea was very similar. After the yin and yang qi was refined, it could produce chaotic energy. Then, could the refinement of the flame qi and yin spirit power produce new energy? Chapter 2734. Of course, Chen Zhao couldn't do it on the spot. He had to find a place with no one around to do it. If he cultivated in front of Zhang Tianyi like this, he would probably be used as a test subject. Zhang Tianyi, Wu Xiu, and Qing He were all confused. Chen Zhao had clearly eaten too much earlier. Why did his appetite suddenly increase? Could something like appetite be activated in a berserk mode? While the three were still confused, Chen Zhao's dark lava had already covered Mr. Cunio's body. There wasn't any more dark power seeping out. A gust of wind blew past. Then the sky was covered by dark clouds again. But this time, the dark clouds weren't the result of a spell. It was a natural phenomenon. Soon, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, followed by a downpour. No one tried to block it. They enjoyed the baptism of the rain. It was as if they were washing away the pain and filth on their bodies. Chen Zhao looked over. In the end, his gaze landed on Zhang Tianyi, Wu Xiu, and Qing He. "Where's Tamamo? You let him go?" Chen Zhao's tone was somewhat interrogative. We didn't let her go," Qing He said awkwardly. "We didn't stop her. Tamamo was indeed weaker than Mr. Cunio. Theoretically, Chen Zhao could take care of Mr. Cunio alone. If the three old guys worked together, they should have been able to keep Tamamo here. But that wasn't the case. Tamamo hadn't planned on fighting them at all. She'd already left a way out for herself. More importantly, Tamamo no Mei's strength was not weak. Defeating Tamamo might not be difficult, but killing her wouldn't be so easy. The biggest difference between Tamamo and Mr. Cunio was that Mr. Cunio couldn't hide. Mr. Jun Fong couldn't hide. No matter where he hid, he would be as conspicuous as a 120-watt light bulb. Tamamo only had to hide in a crowd. If she wanted to, she could hide until the end of time. This had nothing to do with a few people working together, even if there were 10 people at the same level. If Tamamo wanted to run, they wouldn't be able to stop her. Receiving Chen Zhao's disdainful gaze, the three old guys all had unnatural expressions. "Never mind. I'm tired." "Forget it. I'm tired." Chen Zhao's expression collapsed, revealing his fatigue. Chen Zhao didn't plan on asking where Tamamo no Mei had gone. In fact, Chen Zhao also knew how slippery Tamamo was. He had met her 3 times and fought her twice. And every time, he didn't make her stay. He told the 3 of them to leave Tamamo behind. It was indeed a little difficult for them. Moreover, if Tamamo no Mei went all out, he probably wouldn't be any easier to deal with than Junbang-san. This was because Tamamo no Mei had never revealed her true strength. No one knew how many trump cards she had. She was a demon that was even more ancient than Junbang-san. Chen Zhao looked at Zhang Tianyi. "I want to read Dragon Tiger Mountain's records." Zhang Tianyi's mouth twitched. This time, he had tricked Chen Zhao into going back to China. He was treating Chen Zhao as a free fighter again. If he refused at this time, Chen Zhao would probably destroy his Dragon Tiger Mountain. Moreover, what Chen Zhao wanted to read would probably not be an ordinary book. "You absorbed so much in spirit energy. Are you really okay?" Zhang Tianyi asked. "If something happens to me, are you going to suppress me?" Zhang Tianyi smiled awkwardly. He was embarrassed because Chen Zhao had hit the nail on the head. If anything happened to Chen Zhao, it would be his fault. Mr. Chen, seeing Chen Zhao return to Dragon Tiger Mountain, Emohan didn't know how he felt. Happy? Happy? Of course not. Emohan knew his current position. He was Chen Zhao's slave. He had no right to speak in front of Chen Zhao. But in fact, he wasn't completely without benefits. At least, Chen Zhao could be considered his backer now. In the past, he had many strong enemies in China. Those who could be his enemy, live until now, and remember him were basically not easy to deal with. So, having a backer could indeed greatly increase his chances of survival. He knew that Chen Zhao had been dragged by Zhang Tianyi to deal with a terrifying enemy. It was said that it was an enemy that could cause a huge incident. Of course, he knew how terrifying a demon that could cause a huge incident was. In fact, in the incident back then, he was only cannon fodder. But he was still lucky enough to witness that unprecedented battle. Emohan was also a demon that had experienced the incident 20 years ago. Now, Chun Zhao had returned unharmed. Then the demon would naturally be executed. Chun Zhao glanced at Emohan and nodded. He didn't say anything else. After Chun Zhao arrived at Dragon Tiger Mountain, he went straight to the library. Even the secret books in the library were open to Chun Zhao. Zhang Tianyi was also very helpless. If he used the books in the library to fool Chun Zhao, then their friendship would be completely broken. This time, he was in the wrong for calling Chun Zhao back. If he played tricks on this kind of thing again, Chun Zhao definitely wouldn't care about him anymore. What Chun Zhao needed now was to systematically understand his own path. It was almost impossible to want a complete set of cultivation methods. Chun Zhao might be the person with the highest cultivation in human history, or at least one of them. So, there was currently no complete cultivation method or theory. Even the cultivation method Chun Zhao got from Old Monster Kunlai wasn't very complete, and it was more suitable for demons to cultivate. Even for the demon clan, most of them were not suitable to cultivate that cultivation method. It could be said that at Chun Zhao's level, it was no longer suitable for any of the existing cultivation methods and methods. Chun Zhao needed to cultivate and explore on his own. It wasn't a very pleasant thing to be the teacher of the first and all the latecomers, because exploring meant the unknown, and the unknown meant danger. But at this time, the advantage of Chun Zhao's strong body and mental strength was displayed. If it was Zhang Tianyi, he would be asked if he dared to give him a set of cultivation deviation meals. But Chun Zhao didn't need to worry about this. What if he got a pain in his qi circulation? It was fine, he could just turn back. Others were worried about hurting his meridians and acupuncture points, but Chun Zhao didn't have such worries at all. Chun Zhao even dared to swallow the nuclear waste and yin qi in the spiritual world. He might even be able to develop a new train of thought. Of course, Chun Zhao's constitution was almost impossible to replicate. Chun Zhao being able to reach his current level was largely related to luck. There was also an important thing, the golden key, but it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the evolution key. The evolution key fully explained the saying, "What can't kill me will make me stronger in the end." When Chun Zhao entered Dragon Tiger Mountain's library, the library was also locked, temporarily not allowing people to enter. Chapter 2735. What's going on? Why did his aura disappear? Zhang Tianyi sharply sensed that Chun Zhao's aura had suddenly disappeared from the library. This wasn't the first time. Chun Zhao's aura had disappeared irregularly in the past 2 days. At first, Zhang Tianyi would think that something had happened to Chun Zhao when he was cultivating. But as the number of times increased, Zhang Tianyi didn't find it strange anymore. He didn't give up on checking Chun Zhao's situation, but he still couldn't figure it out. Zhang Tianyi stood in front of the library, wondering if he should push the door open to see what was going on. Just then, the door opened from the inside. Chun Zhao walked out with a smile on his face. Zhang Tianyi revealed a trace of surprise. At the moment, Chun Zhao looked like an ordinary person. He didn't have any aura. Even the small world had disappeared. If Chun Zhao had concealed his aura, Zhang Tianyi could understand. But if the small world was concealed, it would make Chun Zhao feel like he was fighting him. That time, Chun Zhao had also completely merged the small world into his body. However, Chun Zhao was clearly not in the same state as before. "How did you do it?" Zhang Tianyi asked straightforwardly. Normally, it was harder for Shangqing realm experts to hide their cultivation than ordinary cultivators. If a cultivator was slightly better and had a higher perception, they would be able to sense the existence of the small world. Even if Chun Zhao had merged the small world into his body like last time, the abnormal aura on his body would also expose his strength. But right now, Chun Zhao's aura was like that of an ordinary person. If it wasn't for Chun Zhao's annoying face, Zhang Tianyi almost suspected that the person before him was an imposter. "I'm not sure either. The micro world and my body have truly fused into one, and the inner world and the micro world have fused into one. In the inner world, After the flame chi and the Yin spirit chi fused and tempered, a strange energy was produced. Because it was tempered by my own magic power, when it was stimulated by my magic power, this energy would vibrate and tear open an opening in a different space. Then, the pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth would directly pour into my body from this different space. In other words, even in an absolute vacuum environment, I won't lack spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and I won't lose my magic power due to the exhaustion of spiritual energy of heaven and earth. You said you can tear open a space? Do you know the origin of this alternate dimension? I don't know, Chun Zhao said. According to modern science, it should be a world that's vaster and larger than our world. It also has spiritual chi that's 100 times denser than ours. I even have a rather bold guess. Chun Zhao nodded. What guess? Have you considered the problem of the spiritual chi tide? What does your current breakthrough have to do with the spiritual energy tide? People have always speculated that Earth is actually the great Tao golden core of some peerless expert, and the heavenly patterns are the meridians of this peerless expert. You should be familiar with this rumor, right? Zhang Tianyi lowered his head and thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, but there's almost no basis for this speculation. If this is true, then this peerless expert is in the same realm as me. No, if this is true, then this peerless expert must be in a realm or higher than mine. So he must be able to tear open that alternate dimension. Then, the spiritual chi tide can explain why the density of spiritual chi will increase by 10 or even 100 times. It gives me the feeling that it's more like the cycle of a cultivation technique. Chun Zhao paused and then said, also, we've all speculated that the evolution of a small world will eventually turn into a real world. If this speculation is correct, then isn't Earth a real example? Zhang Tianyi suddenly looked at Chun Zhao. You found the trick? No, Chun Zhao said helplessly. Although my cultivation has improved, I still have no clue about our speculation. At the moment, Chun Zhao and Zhang Tianyi were not joking around as usual. Instead, he seriously communicated with Zhang Tianyi. Then, do you think that Earth is alive? Chun Zhao shook his head. According to the clues we have and the hypothesis, I think it's dead. When is the next gathering? You decide the time, Chun Zhao said. Right now, their discussion was only vague. There were many things that could not be studied or discussed in depth. Moreover, Zhang Tianyi felt that he was not ready yet, because his realm was not high enough. Chun Zhao had already come into contact with things of that level, but Zhang Tianyi himself had no clue. Therefore, it was easy for Chun Zhao to make mistakes because he could not understand. This would be a huge loss to his cultivation and path. Did you find anything in the library of Mount Longhu? Yes, I found many useful things. They were quite enlightening for me. Which books enlightened you? You have to use your heart to find them. If you are fated, you will naturally find them. When Chun Zhao said this, he only felt that his body and mind were at ease. On the other hand, it was as if Zhang Tianyi had been fed dog shit, because most of the time, he was the one saying this to others. In reality, there was nothing that could be said or not said. It was just that he was not willing to say it, or was too lazy to say it. But in the eyes of the low-level cultivators, it was because Zhang Tianyi was unfathomable and they were too mediocre. But as an expert, how could Zhang Tianyi not know? Chun Zhao's words were just to disgust him. Yes, Chun Zhao was purely trying to disgust Zhang Tianyi. Life is full of ups and downs. Zhang Tianyi roared. Don't bully me because I'm poor. Say this to me in 30 years, Chun Zhao sneered. Oh, I'm leaving. You're going back to America? In a few days, I've arranged a gathering with the employees of a domestic animation company. I'll go home after the Lantern Festival. Do you mind if I come too? Yes, Chun Zhao said with a cold expression. Don't be so stingy. At most, I'll invite you to the gathering of the studio I recruited. I've invested hundreds of millions of yuan into my animation company. It's not something any random person can compare to. My goal is for my company to change the domestic animation market, to charge out of Asia and into the world. Chun Zhao did not have such plans, but it did not stop him from bragging in front of Zhang Tianyi. Zhang Tianyi glanced at Chun Zhao with disdain. Why don't you say charge out of the solar system and into the universe? Anyway, you can be jealous. My company is about to produce an animated film. How about we compete? I'll have my studio produce an animation too. Let's compare the ratings. Or the number of internet views. What ratings and views? My goal is the big screen. You're too low end. I don't want to talk to you. You'll lower my level. Chapter 2736. Shouldn't you leave something behind before you leave? Zhang Tianyi asked. Qin Zhao turned to look at Zhang Tianyi. Why do you sound like a villain's lines when they reveal their true colors? Zhang Tianyi looked at Chun Zhao with a dark expression. He thought to himself, even if I'm a villain, I won't pick on a mad dog like you. You've seen my grand disciple. Fanya, how about it? Are you interested in being a teacher? Ha! Chun Zhao chuckled. Zhang Tianyi said goodbye. Don't go. Zhang Tianyi pulled Chun Zhao. You can even be a teacher in name. Wow. Should I be proud? Chun Zhao's face was full of disdain. She's the future star of Dragon Tiger Mountain. She might even be the sect leader or a celestial master. It's not embarrassing to be a teacher to a celestial master. Don't think I don't know that there are as many future sect leaders as dogs in your sect. Future celestial masters are everywhere, like that 1,000-year-old bloodline. Don't tell me you brought him here to be a mascot. Then I can't help it. There are too many talents in the sect. I have a headache too. Zhang Tianyi had an expression that was asking for a beating. However, there's so many prodigies who can truly reach the enchanting realm. The successors who guard the mountain gates may not be able to walk out from among them. Talent is one thing. Opportunity is another. This was the reality. If one could reach the enchanting realm just by relying on talents, in this world, there wouldn't only be a handful of enchanting realm experts. As far as Chun Zhao knew, there were only Biafra, the 23rd generation Bloody Mary, Zhang Tianyi, Wu Su Jinren, and Qing Ping Jinren. Furthermore, who knew how many heavenly materials and earthly treasures they had used in the process. And with the Celestial Master sect's current status and prestige, they needed at least one Shang-Qing Realm Master to protect them from being coveted. Even when he died and the Spiritual Tide era came. And Qin Zhao was undoubtedly the best guide for Fanya. Zhang Tianyi also knew that it was too difficult for Fanya to become the second Qin Zhao. But even if Fanya only reached the Shang-Qing realm, the Celestial Master sect of Dragon Tiger Mountain would make a fortune. No time, no interest, no ideas, no benefits. In fact, if Fanya really did manage to lead the Celestial Master sect on Longhu Mountain one day, she would indeed have a very good network of connections. Even if she did not manage to take over the Celestial Master sect of Mount Longhu in the end, she would still be an important figure in the sect. In the future, when you run into trouble, all you have to do is take it out. I'm the teacher of the Celestial Masters of Longhu Mountain. Just this title alone was enough to make him awesome. However, teaching disciples was a waste of time. Chun Zhao didn't need it. His laziness was a terminal cancer. Moreover, Chun Zhao didn't really like the disciples of the celestial sect of Dragon Tiger Mountain, especially the Yang guy. To others, those with the surname Yang were noble and unsullied. But to Chun Zhao, she was a fucking saint. You owe me a favor, and you're not going to return it just because you say so? I asked you to go undercover, but you went undercover and became one of the other party's people. If he didn't have a good sect, if he didn't have a good grandmaster, Chun Zhao cut him up like sashimi. Who knew if Fanya would also be trained by Zhang Tianyi to become the second Yanghua? Chun Zhao didn't plan to have another disciple who disobeyed him all the time. That would just be looking for trouble for himself. Zhang Tianyi still wanted to persuade him, but Chun Zhao made up his mind. He wouldn't listen. He would just chant, "Old Mo, we're going down the mountain." Mo Han put down the Dragon Tiger Mountain book in his hand. These few days, he was actually immersed in the book provided by the Taoist sacred ground. It was a little hard to extricate himself. The reason why Dragon Tiger Mountain did not restrict Mo Han. Actually, it was because there were no restrictions on Chun Zhao. But what was the difference between Chun Zhao and Mo Han? If Mo Han really needed a book, Chun Zhao would tell him. He told Chen Zhao, and Chen Zhao copied it out for him. So this restriction was meaningless. He might as well show it to him openly. Of course, the prerequisite was that he couldn't copy it, although he was not very willing to leave Dragon Tiger Mountain. And Mohan still had to follow Chen Zhao's orders. They took a flight back to Magic City. Over the past few days, Zhang Ting and Yi Ziqing had accompanied Fei Lai around the entire Sorcerer City. And Chen Zhao, this irresponsible man, only accompanied Fei Lai for 2 days. Then he disappeared without a trace. Zhang Ting and Yi Ziqing even reported him to Fei Lai. But Fei Lai was already used to this. If Chen Zhao could stay where he was obediently, that would be truly strange. Fei Lai was also not surprised by Chen Zhao's sudden return. "Darling, are you done?" Fei Lai had actually realized that something was wrong with Chen Zhao when he'd been hit by the 9 dirty spells. But she knew that she couldn't help, so she didn't show it. "Yes, I'm done." Chen Zhao nodded. "Uncle, you must have gone to defeat some Demon King again. You didn't even bring me." The younger ones were very unhappy that Chen Zhao had left them behind. Even the most introverted Kilo was actually a restless young man. Moreover, he was already at the age of restlessness. Chen Zhao heard that when he was in school, he had already started fighting back against those who had bullied him. Zhang Ting and Yi Ziqing were also in the living room. They had just walked around the mall with Fei Lai. When they came back, they saw Chen Zhao. Hearing the children's words, they all thought that it was a fairy tale that Chen Zhao and Fei Lai had told them. And Chen Zhao was the hero in the fairy tale. Were all foreign children so childish? Chen Zhao chatted with the children for a bit. Then everyone went to the restaurant. Just then, a few police officers entered the restaurant. Chen Zhao recognized one of them. It was the policewoman who had brought him to the police station that day. Her name was Rolling. "Hello, Officer Rolling. Mr. Chen, there's a murder case that requires your assistance." Chen Zhao's expression was slightly awkward. "Officer Rolling, I was assisting last time too. Are you assisting this time too? Did I offend you?" "Just assisting," Rolling emphasized. "You've already explained to me what you mean by assisting in the investigation. The situation this time is a bit special." Rolling stared at Chen Zhao, but then she turned to Yi Ziqing. "Ms. Yi, the victim this time is your ex-boyfriend, Yu Keming." Yi Ziqing froze. How is that possible? He's dead? She didn't have any feelings for Yu Keming anymore. But when she heard that Yu Keming was dead, she was still shocked. Yes, he died in his own home 4 days ago. He was only discovered today. The body has already been found. I had some conflicts with him, but you don't suspect me of being the murderer, right? Chen Zhao said helplessly. "It's not that I suspect you, but the situation this time is a bit special. The victim's death isn't normal." That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.